Welcome back, everybody, to the SCL. We kick off week 2 now with more Valorant action. We've had our closed side where these players played to find out where they belong. Week 1 was the chance to prove themselves, and arguably a lot of teams managed to do so in a very decisive manner, like UGA Black at the end of our showcase on stream just last week. But we're stepping away, Dallas, from our Tier 1 segment, and we're now jumping over to Tier 2 for today. We're seeing who's the Giants of Tier 2 and who's going to make a claim to take down the Giants of Tier 1 later on in playoffs.
Right, that's kind of a big test that we're going to be really just answering questions for over the course of the season, but better yet today specifically as we're looking at two Titans within the Division 2 series. I mean, when you look at what Tier 2 has to offer, I mean, the competition was just so cutthroat when it came around to those placement matches that realistically, there were so many situations and so many teams where you look at the narrow margins between them, and you're saying that, honestly, if we do make Tier 1 bigger, if we make Tier 2 larger, or even then give them more opportunities, it looks like the entirety of what seems like Tier 2 could compete on that same level, but realistically, we just can't have that happening. We're going to give that opportunity during playoffs, so as it stands here today, we're going to have a pretty good litmus test of what they're capable of in the meantime.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see how this pans out, but a large portion of success for Tier 2, and for the majority, it feels like for the collegiate scene, is how prepared you are, how versed you are on every map currently in the pool. With Ascent having stepped out, Dallas, it truly does feel like we're stepping away from some of those status quo maps, so to say, starting to test the limits maybe of what these players really know and what they're comfortable with. And from the sneak peek we had just a little bit early at our map ban selection phase, I think there is something maybe being thrown out in the works right off the start, a bit of an unexpected map for collegiate, even in the current pool. We'll jump on over to our map ban selection screen. It's Split that is going up first for our first map of the day. Abyss and Fracture were banned immediately. Split's going to be picked by UKY, and then LA will go for Lotus. So back into Lotus, that is almost feeling like the new Ascent in the current selection of pool. It's the default for most teams. Bind and Pearl, though, banned, and then Haven, which is also alongside Lotus and the most played for the current pool, will be our decider if it's required.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing when it comes down to like finding a default, as you mentioned, when it comes around to Ascent for the longest time in the map pool, it comes down to more so not how many sites there are, what the map really feels like, how easy the rotation between sites are when something falls through and your game plan doesn't go in your direction. I mean, you look at Lotus, you look at that secret cubby, you look at that rotating door from Seaside. I mean, it is just all over the place. It's very easy to get where you want to go, and if things don't go your way, it's very easy for IGLs. It puts a lot of weight off of their shoulders to say, hey, it's an easy little call out there to say, transfer over, go to B, maybe give it a shot, because if it's there and it's available, it's easy to do. But in Ascent, it's the same exact thing. That middle of the map, while it doesn't have a site actually on top of it, it is very important to make it very easy to make those transfers. And Split could even fill those same exact shoes with how important the middle control is on the attacking side. So, I mean, realistically, looking at Lotus, though, having those 3 sites, having more ops available, making that middle of the map actually feasible and have a plant position inside of it makes it very easy for teams to go for. And even then more so, when it comes around to defaults, we're not seeing it really take as much of a manner on teams anymore. I think as time has come along, especially with Ascent being out of the pool now, teams are saying this is a little bit of a new era here. We're finally seeing some adjustments. We're seeing some newer maps that are coming to play. All the reworks that we've seen on all these maps over and over again now coming to play once more, saying that it's a diverse time now in Valorant. We're seeing a new era. We're seeing new map pools, and especially with Ascent out, they understand that there is no home ground anymore. You need to just know how to travel.
So has Split's map change that came a while back been enough to really make this the new change up for a lot of teams? I think if you are LA Tech and kind of shocked that that was in the first selection, I would typically assume that'd be a map that is almost free to let through that first ban phase, Dallas, because not many teams would pick it. So maybe this is a really good start for UKY to kind of just punch their ticket immediately in and say, we're going to test your limits as far as we possibly can, because we're sure as heck also going to know Lotus, right? We're going to know this map. We're going to test all of our strategies, all the strategies we've seen across Tier 1 and now Tier 2 for the SCL, and hopefully find what we think would work after the hopeful map 1 win we get over on ours. So if Haven even has to be played, it's very similar to Lotus. Another 3 objective map where B sites typically just used as a pivot point. But I would argue for Haven, the B site's more so used as a pivot point, as a flanking point for a lot of attacking teams. That's your Cypher on attack. That's your Sentinel on attack. Wrapping in through wraparound control towards the back of A site, even over towards Garage Window to be able to take towards defender spawn that direction for a hold on C, for a post plant. All of these kind of coagulate into success stories for offenses, but it's so much harder to do that for the map of Split. Split is a end all be all, he who controls mid controls this map. And defensively, it's even more important just to deny that, because there's no need for you to sit there stalwart. You just need to make sure that the attack cannot use that as a direct way to attack either of these two sites, because the moment they get control of that central alley, Dallas, they have the ability to rotate to B, they have the ability to rotate to A within 5 to 6 seconds, and you have to take the long way over, not only burning any chances to assist the players on those sites as the attack rushes and kind of unfurls into their site, but also you have to kind of burn the time that would be there to try to retake that site when the spike is down. All of that is valuable time that's needed as a defending team.
Yeah, I mean, already just going ahead and talking about defense, talking attack, and look at these competitions. I mean, better yet, already seeing the duelist difference when it comes around to the Rays, looking at the Yoru and kind of the shift in terms of that, understanding that Tejo is going to be a necessity, it feels like, in every single map and every single match at this point, just purely because of the power grid that exists within that singular individual. But knowing that already, knowing that's going to be there, that's going to be a pivot point. I mean, you're not too worried about the information. The drone is outstanding, lets you know at least where somebody is from the gunfire alone, but stacked on top of it, having the scan, having the suppression, I mean, what can't this guy do? But knowing that, even better yet, seeing the difference, seeing that we're getting a secondary initiator already on both sides as well, knowing it's going to be between that sky and looking at that breach. The sky is a little, I would say, unorthodox. Consider what we've seen over time. The breach makes a lot more sense with all the corridors and all the halls and making use of those corners, but of whether or not it's going to be useful when you have a who is all who can now flash, and even more so Yoru, who is a bit of a pseudo initiator. So it's going to be interesting to see what we see coming to LA Tech, and whether or not their game plan is going to say, just let's make them turn every single given second of the entire match. As you know, obviously UK wide, there seems a little more tried and true, playing around the Viper, cutting off those sight lanes, giving them areas of the map where you can create walls that can't be flashed off of.
Now, LA Tech Blue, coming into this, we were expecting to be a very high-ranked team here in the SGL. Georgia Tech, we knew were good. They kind of upset in week 1 against those same LA Tech roster. So maybe they're coming in with a bit of a vengeance in mind for week 2, wanting to
13-10,
shut
13-11.
down the UK-wide side. It was a very close game, right? Like, in more than we would expect, at least in my mind. Georgia Tech kind of just shocked them. And that's the reason why we put them so high in the standings for this week. If you haven't checked our Twitter, the socials for the SEL, Georgia Tech has taken the helm at the top of the leaderboard for that. A lot of that in due part for the LA Tech victory, as well as UAH's victory, which they had beat them back in December for the VMix showcase that we did here for this production side. But it is a first blood for the Kentucky side instead of LA Tech. Elijah tries to prowl through A main, gets punished for it, and now without much utility, you kind of have to make a swift approach here towards this A side.
Yeah, I mean, going ahead, shifting the hold of anywhere else. I mean, even then, better yet, the A sides could be that best option, but even then, a very quick answer already coming through. It just comes down to UKY. Understood they found an initial pick. They understand at the site, and there's a lot of utility there that they don't want to go up against, or just find themselves a new home. They've done a great job shifting that focus over here towards the A side, making themselves a home very easily, not really showing too much contention when it comes around to the nitty gritty, and they found themselves some easy picks off the back of it, just clearing out house. Lincoln Mooney being the last one standing, being a 1v4 with nothing but a classic in hand. There's only so much you can really do against the arsenal that White's bringing to the table.
LA Tech had a really good job of initially stalling UKY's approach into site through A main. Breach stun went out from Narp. It hit 3 out of the 4 players that were initially through the gates in A main. And if there were players behind that for LA Tech, it would have been a lot more successful of a defense from them. But the issue that I spoke about, that rotation, the time it takes to get your players over on this map on defense for split, just stopped almost all of that idea in its tracks. They only had 2 players active on site. One of them already tried to take back through screens. The other one was up inside tower. There's just nothing you can really do with the limited man count that you have there. Ascent, bind, any of those, you've got a TP, you've got the quick ability to move over. It's so much quicker to get there. Split, that is just the problem with this map, and it's going to be a consistent thing, which is maybe the reason why we see Yoru, of all things, here for LA Tech Blues defense. Yeah, a duelist, they don't really have the ability to close the gap in a, what you just say, a standard way, Dallas, with like a tailwind or a boost pack or anything like that, but they do have the ability to use their decoy to relocate back over to the site and try to prey off that information if it's given at all from Kentucky. And if it isn't, that means Kentucky's being forced to play a very slow game in these early rounds and throughout the rest of the round in this attack.
And while the feint is used in the decoy, better yet, as a bit of a feint for some of this utility, like the Vice, for example, with the walls and such, so you're not showing that you're isolated from the rest of the team, the flashes on this map are outstanding. I mean, there's so many walls. Once again, it acts just like a breach, where I mean, you were able to utilize all these close, narrow hallways to your advantage to find yourself those relatively free gunfights, it feels. So, I mean, Yoru has become a regular pick when it comes around to this map, as crazy as it sounds. I mean, when you look at the entire history of Valorant. So, I mean, we're in a new day and age where things feel much more even, much more moderated, and much more entertaining to watch across the board, considering that all these comfortable picks can find some feasible solution to any kind of problem presented to them. But the one problem showing up against LA Tech right now is the fact that they don't really have much of a buy on their hands. Still nothing but classics on the board, and UK Whites find themselves a nice, comfy little hole. When it comes around to this B site and show what they're capable of, well, Hayes can find at least one off the board. That's a Bulldog, a Guardian, something out of the hands of these white players. But as they finally get on the side, you're going to tell it's a much different story as they find their way just mowing through the rest of what they're doing.
Yeah, Hayes just really has no chance. The backside of Pillar, it'll be an easy cleanup. The UK White only losing that single weapon, and it's really no fault against them. This will be a very strong arsenal heading into round 3. Going for the hefty expenditure in round 2 with the Bulldogs and the Guardian just means that if they come out victorious and it pans out, barely losing all those weapons, and this capacity only losing a single, round 3 just becomes even more easy for them. Now facing, yes, real rifles out of LA Tech Blue, but they have the same distance. Just a little bit less lethality, but they have that ability to close the gap a little bit more effectively, and they've shown that throughout those first 2 rounds, having that double controller set up and even having the ability to close the gap easier with that raise. And I want to talk about that Fussy and Fudge initial breach into the B side. They knew that that Vice Wall was going to be there, so Fussy waited. They waited for Fudge to get out of the open too. They wanted the Tahoe next to them. They waited to see the wall, and then the moment they were like, let's go in, the team, 3 out of the 5 stayed back inside Garage, and those 2 stepped out into the breach and took control of that site. Your duelist and your strongest damaging initiator, controlling the tempo, controlling that distance and pacing. Perfect read from UKY. This 3rd round, though, it's going to be a lot harder knowing that LA Tech have weapons and kit to back up everything else.
It's kind of crazy to see how much of a telltale sign that confidence of that initial push is. I mean, when you look at the expended utility when it came around to LA Tech just to push out and find that singular orb, which doesn't even find the guaranteed annihilation. It's a bit crazy to see that. I mean, you can consider that they think that they are going to win definitively off the back of those guns, and they don't need nearly as much utility to get the job done. Meanwhile, LA Tech, I mean, they've been slowing it down, but White has done a better job of that. Understand that we can just go ahead, press that S key, we don't expend anything, and we see them just going ahead and completely investing for this. I mean, look at even then, all the attributes really coming out. Sure, there's one back towards Vince, and sure, some damage gets out, but I mean, that's a good exchange considering it's a Bulldog. Look at the rest of the team, rotate, and boom, free off the back of Magnetic. So, I mean, just looking at these shifts and looking at these plays being made by White, I feel like they're going to make this round really deep till the end of it. I mean, look at the health pools. This could be done.
Even with the initial loss of life, the player trying to swing through ropes, it's been no sweat off the back here for Kentucky, but they just don't have the great ability to get in towards sight just yet. Spike's been dropped. It was maybe available for Magnetic to kind of get into that space and go for a frag, but Cornball was not anywhere near to try to assist off the back of that. So a round loss for Kentucky, but at the end of the day, look what they forced out of the hands of LA Tech Blue. Right. They'll only have 2 weapons to work with, and this turns into the state. Do we force up to match the rest of the team, or do we have to kind of sit into a bit of an eco or thrifty scenario for round 4? And Kentucky, they burned all their money, and the start of round 2, they should still have enough to go through on round 4. They will have everything they could possibly ask for to deal with the defense that's going to have to make some very dangerous decisions, and it's going to be Guardians for them and a Bulldog from Dansters. They're gonna have to sit really far back, and relying on that controller and Tahoe to do so may not pan out for you, because it will be a center push, looks like, from the Kentucky side, as they are already prowling to take this central alley.
Yeah, already looking to see if they can be a bit of a B peak here towards main, but I mean, nothing really being given up too much off the back of it. I mean, once again, we can talk about those ult orbs and the contestant for it, but I mean, even then, they're not finding too much off the back of it. You're just looking at these small little nitpick trades that are coming through, and even then, Narc's one on top, able to go ahead and find those rifle kills. I mean, keep in mind, White, they're the ones who won that last round. Sure, they didn't get the buy, and they didn't get too much money because they didn't get the plant down as a little bit of an extra bonus for winning that one, but when we look at the money that was ripped out of LA Tech, it really just busts itself out of dividends. And knowing that even then, going into a round like this, you have to win those shots, knowing that you have a bit more to work with here, knowing that you got to capitalize off that. You got to give yourself a bonus. You got to earn that thing. LA Tech, maybe the ones find themselves in the better end of that as they find themselves looking at a retake situation, all set up towards B heaven. They have not found a single player not ready for a retake, what feels like within 5 seconds after the bomb going down.
Taiga has the first option for a fight here, but Mo loses out. That was your only assistance on site. Magnetic was holding backside of tower. Didn't want to peek. was forced to after the whole team was losing out in every engagement at that distance, at that range. And LA Tech now, with 3 players left, have the easiest defuse of all time and can hand it off to the agent that they value most with the ultimate. And that will mean that the Armageddon is online now for Hayes, only requiring 4 rounds to get that fully in effect, which means round 5, post-plant scenario-wise for Kentucky, they're going to have to be very spread away. The default on site is going to have to be very different. They're going to, more likely than not, try to prioritize the A side, I would feel like, Dallas, where they can sit a little bit further away from site, either stack heavy towards tower and try to keep that Tejo away from defender spawn and maybe more closer to ropes where it's harder to get a wider range for the Armageddon, or they're going to have to sit closer towards the backside of screens or even towards a main. Anything to try to vacate and cluster and vacate away from these clustered positions you would hold for a very close default that comes out from it. But you only have pistols, you're ecoing anyways. The best thing you can ask for is try to burn that ultimate, which would be the biggest value for you, if not just dropping a couple more weapons to make it at least somewhat costly. A couple thousand credits extra that LA Tech will have to expend.
Yeah, I mean, knowing that Viper's Pit is also on hand, I mean, you just got to get that spike down, which, I mean, what he has done successfully, relatively consistently, but the issue is, it's taken so long to get into those shoes where the spike actually does go down. They've taken their quite a bit of time, it feels like, every single time for it. I mean, obviously, you got to give somewhat of a testament to LA Tech Blue for putting a lot of pressure on initially every single time. Knowing that secondary round, when you have the bonus, when you have what looks like a really good round, and even then, afterwards, I mean, look at round number 3, that was a round where they didn't get the plant down, but yet they still worked a lot of stuff away. They can't be nearly as hesitant. They have to figure out what they want to do with this fight. They have to press the W key, and they just got to start giving this thing their best darn shot. As you can see, they finally met themselves at home over on A. It feels like every single time the rotation is already there. Every single player is instantaneously answering, and they can never get themselves any more of a post play.
Hayes has a chance for an ace, but it will require them now to take down their doppelganger. A desperate 1v1. They don't know where they are. They're going to check down the lower corner, but Fudge lying in wait and sweet desserts here for Kentucky to strip away this round on an eco buy against the side here for LA Tech Blue. And they did, in fact, use a whole lot to get that job done, but Hayes at least gains the value afterwards of getting 4 frags in this round, charging the ultimate back up by all accounts, but not enough to get it and not enough to say, I did enough in the round to carry my team. So much of their pressure was all on Tower Dallas for LA Tech Blue that it was just the wrong way to play that post plant to try to retake the objective, and UK White knew that, read into it, and they played a perfect flash game with that Yoru up into tower, with the flash game with the Sky, the guiding light that we were questioning on an initiator choice, up through tower, through the double smoke on door, and just fragged out of their minds with Sheriffs up close, and that just gave more space for Fussy and Fudge with those stingers to get rid of screens, to get rid of the player down in security, and then sit just below that rafter side of heaven. And now look where we are on B site, already in control of site, a cosmic divide to make matters worse, and now a free plant to where, yes, your Tejo could theoretically salvo and force them away, but it was on cooldown because they had to burn that to try to buy time, and that failed, leaving Hayes to go gun up, gets their 1, but has so much more in front of them as you have to rely on the Yoru flashes, and Danster gets no value from this. Despite having a 2v2 staring at them, no one from LA Tech pushes through. Salvos to try to give Oni an opportunity, but Hayes will take the shots instead. Cornball may have to worry about the flash here from the Thorn Rose, but it won't matter. It's for 2, and Cornball gets the 4th round for Kentucky. 7-2 for your Astra of all things to lead this team.
Yeah, pinch wasn't simultaneous, and even then, I mean, better yet, you're expecting Hayes to be taking those shots and landing those. If we look at the scoreboard, if it's anything to go by, but I mean, looking at that so far, I mean, it's just good from Kentucky, as you can see. I mean, obviously, it took an ult to get to that comfort zone that they wanted, but finally finding the encouragement, finally getting there on the side, finally making those plays and making those quick plans. They understand that there's going to be a bit of a funnel. There's going to be a bit of a time. There's an actual point to be setting up here. And to compensate for that, we saw LA Tech invest one of those ultimates. Look for ways. Say, there's got to be something we do here to buff this out, to get something done. And, well, they did it. But they don't have to do it on a round like this, because while you press W key, it needs to be collective. It needs to be concise. It needs to make sense. And right there, we just saw a single rogue duelist going out there, getting gunned down and handing over a rifle to the side of LA Tech to work with for their arguably most threatening player. Obviously, Hayes, top of the scoreboard, saying this guy just got a free upgrade. Now we may be back in trouble once more because we're down a man.
Yeah, you talk about it being a collective when holding down the W key. I don't think there's a better, more descriptive term for it. If you are going to be engaging like that in a state that is not the standard of Valorant, being more strategic, holding back, waiting for angles, things like that, right? And letting the attack kind of prowl into your space and counteracting and stalling with utility. It has to be together as a group. It is a well-oiled machine, and the moment that somebody starts to hold back is the moment your engine starts to stutter and falter and falls apart. Nobody wants to replace an engine, and Kentucky's is roaring right now after the successes they had these last 2 rounds. As up close here, Elijah hoping for more, spots the barrel of Taiga, but Taiga also spots them as Fudge removes Not from the equation.
30 seconds
the really
left.
only big player we've seen from LA Tech that's clutched up major has been Hayes, and Hayes is still standing, having gotten the Armageddon just 2 rounds later. But they have no weapons still. The one they dropped early, Dallas, they weren't able to collect in full effect. They hand off to another player the gun that they had, and now they're being stalled out by that salvo back towards defender spawn into the screen side. And this is where the ultimate comes in. Is there a corner? Kentucky and Fudge barely finds a corner. The Armageddon does not get the effect they wanted. They send out the concussive blast, trying to stun the player on sight, and this is where the Viper's pit just ruins any chances, Dallas.
Yeah, he was already going ahead, Fudge, knocking down Hayes and Oni with that Armageddon. Dude, come on! Ryan, take a hit! This thing does too much! But already fighting 2, collectively making the job for the rest of the team so darn easy. You find 2 frags and you weren't even looking at the players face to face to find that kill, and makes it a done and dusted deal for the rest of the round, making it look almost like nothing for White to find themselves another off the backup.
Split tends to be a map that's dominated by one side over the other. A lot of teams argue that they're better on defense for the map, and a lot of teams will argue that it is an attacker-favorited map, but truly it just comes down to an individual's margin. And the fact of the matter is, LA Tech has been entirely led by the nose by Hayes, and this is not something that you can see for most teams at this level, for the upper echelons, we think, for tier 2. It cannot just be a Hayes show. And yes, Tejo as the agent is greatly assisting with that stat margin. The ult does too much damage. It's so easy to chase after somebody using the salvo to either force them to stay still or force them back and away from sight. It's so easy to use special delivery as a go button for your team, even for yourself, almost like a guiding light where if you're a Sky, you can also move alongside it to get that stun out. Tejo seems super strong, and Hayes is using that very well for themselves, but where's the rest of the team finding value off of these? Where's the rest of the team finding success in their own utility, in their own kits, and their teammates' kits to try to give this team that little bit of an edge? I'm hoping this timeout will be enough for them, obviously giving so much in favor for UK White early in this half as we're finally reaching round 8 into the second stage of this first half. Maybe, just maybe, the Cosmic Divide will come a little bit more successfully when you charge up to the Dimensional Drift for Dancers again, which may take 5 more rounds if you only are finding deaths at this state. But once you get that online, maybe use it a little bit more for information and less for the chance of kill, like we saw in round 5, where they just kind of sent it out into space, tried to go for a flash, and obviously failed and didn't get really much off the back of it.
Well, that's the problem with their composition. They have to win. It is purely Tejo, and Hayes is too busy getting kills for him to have to do that information. Because clearly rely on the rest of your team for that right now. It's an unfortunate reality that you're facing where you have to be a Swiss Army knife. You have to be the one to do it all, and quite frankly, you can't do that. The rest of LA Tech has to go ahead and be in the front seat while Tejo takes a bit of a back seat. And you see what's doing, the rest is very unanimous agreement. We can't do that. We can't let him do nothing and just collect his information as we're pushing forward, because we're not able to shoot back right now. Things aren't working out. The lineups aren't there. And even then, by the time you want to take those fights, and by the time you well up any confidence, White understands that this is a snowball effect. They're looking better and better and better as this goes along. Their confidence is welling up, seeing that the rest of the guys aren't, and they're getting W even harder than they did before.
5 on 4. LA Tech need to retake this side, and if they don't, the loser's bonus will only continue to tally in their favor, but will it be enough to guarantee a bye in this next round? I don't think it will be a 100% sure shot of it. So they'll use their only thunder. They want to give themselves the best obstacle in front of them. Oni gets their one off towards Fussy, but Dancers and Oni immediately get fragged back. Hayes has been so consistent, but can't keep the shots consistent as Cornball out-frags them in Fudge. The doppelganger, the Tejo for UKY, just dominates. A Swiss Army knife may be the most apt description for this agent, and Fudge, well, maybe a little less effective in the kill department for Hayes, only has 3 deaths and is, I mean, just spearheading Dallas, this Kentucky team, through this LA Tech roster.
Yeah, I mean, able to be a catalyst for sure. I mean, considering the amount of assists that are on way, but even more so when you look at the damage being done just on a round-to-round basis. The ACS of Tejo is just always going to be way too high. I mean, it's going to be nearly that of a duelist, if not more, just considering what you do on a round-to-round basis and knowing that utility, I mean, while not the cheapest in the world, I mean, it is warranted. It pays itself back tenfold every single time, considering what you're either cutting off or what you're giving or what you're stunning or what you're silencing or what you're seeing. I mean, what can't the guy do? So looking at the rest of the team, seeing what's being done, understandably so, you look at White, you look more so. You have to find these cutoffs. You have to find something to control those grounds, and knowing that we see that is a Tejo versus Tejo kind of match in terms of the top of the drawing those, having a lot of strength, giving yourself relative sort of space when one who's controlling that on a map that is so
spike planted.
You're gonna have these. I mean, this is now your home court. You've made things catered to the way that your team wants to play it. You're the one choking these guys off from entering out of screens and going ahead and denying this retake that happens. That LA Tech has been so darn fast in previously. You're making finally a singular kill to come through, but so much damage done in the meantime that this payoff is definitely there.
You have your Astros still lagging behind if you're Kentucky. They have so much utility they can just continue to lay down to try to assist Fudge here towards sides. Magnetic keeps the upper heaven side safe. Oni, who traded out their Phantom from earlier, they took from Taiga, now gets it off towards Narp. But Narp will tap the spike. Time is already a factor for denial, but you'd have to stick this a couple seconds prior. There is no chance any further, and time will be the biggest facilitator, I think, for Kentucky's offense. They go in quick, and when they decide to make that engagement, nothing that LA Tech seemingly are sending their way, Dallas, in terms of utility or even man count has been able to keep them back. And that is the problem with Split. I talked about the difficulty in transition from site to site. You either put all your eggs in one basket and stack up all 5 players and take the gamble they're going to hit that objective, or you try to wait things out. But if you lose 2 players on a push that Kentucky take to a site, the chances for a retake when it's already so hard are nigh impossible. So you have to play safe, and then you have to win the kill department afterwards, and there's just something that's not happening for them winning the kill department afterwards.
And this entire thing, I mean, when you look at having a one-man army, it makes the attacking side look that much more threatening when you consider that one guy. So we'll see with the rest of the team. I mean, you don't need to do that all eggs in one basket kind of approach. Already see Hayes going out, able to, once again, start off around in a great manner, fighting an initial blood. You got to make sure the exchange is there. You got to make sure to keep it rolling. And already in a 1v1, going in, trading off one for another over towards that A side, you're making sure to keep these numbers towards your advantage, but you have to keep your players alive. And I think with the 2 ultimates now, and then Annihilation now on Kentucky side, that's unfortunate. I mean, that's an equilibrium to some degree. I mean, we already saw that Fudge. Keep in mind, the last time the Annihilation was used, found 2 kills off of it. 2. So, I mean, just easy hallways and just ping that thing down, find kills, and then it's just rolling down the lane. So, I mean, you can go ahead and split things up however you want here, especially at the start of a round. We're seeing that happen. We're seeing LA Tech report there, but we got to see a little bit more in these regions.
Oh, Fuzzy just can't get away from the barrage. The salvos find yet another frag here for Hayes. That's now one of your more important players for Kentucky's offense in this round, when they're already down a player. Their duelist to try to close that gap, and Cornball gets suffocated. Huge breach concussed from down below. Elijah will try to take control of ropes and make sure there's no ability to rotate, and Fudge will just have to sit back, treat the next 20 seconds, it feels like, as a timeout, Dallas, and talk things through about what went so darn wrong in this round. And a lot of that's going to be how far forward and how much importance LA Tech decided to put in terms of mid in the central alley. I said it before, the team that controls Central controls this map, controls the pace, controls the win condition by all accounts. And LA Tech really catching key into that, shut that down. But the moment that we see Kentucky ignore mid, like we saw them do a couple of times now already, throughout just 10 rounds on offense, even the first 6 rounds on offense, where they just took that direct approach through A, that still has yet to be answered for a win for LA Tech. How are they going to fix that problem?
Well, also, they've found themselves winning the majority of gunfights. And in that round, I feel like there wasn't very many to chalk it up to. We saw Hayes find 2 kills purely off of utility. And that alone is enough to go ahead and, I mean, you put that into perspective, say it's a 5v3 if we're just looking at a singular player. That's enough of an impact to go ahead, especially at the start of a round, kind of put every single nail in the coffin that you need. You're already scrapping together game plans. You're already trying to figure out what you can do to kind of compensate for the lack of this utility that's going to be on the field. And it's just not there. I mean, looking at everything you're working with, you got to make sure to keep some of these players alive, and they've gone right back to the tried and true. Pushing as a 5-man stack, looking to see where they can overwhelm the objective. Already very good trades in the process. a 1v1, you're understandably losing Fudge in that process. I mean, your Taeho's out of the game, but I mean, that's not the biggest deal. You look at everybody else available. Cause it divide, dimensional drift here. You get your hands off. You hear some things. You got to get these trades off, and then it doesn't even matter.
Spike down A.
Elijah getting the other two. I mean, that is a perfect round that LA Tech needed to wake up.
You said
two players finding 2Ks and put themselves not only on the board in terms of confidence, but saying, hey, this is now a 4-round half. This is a heck of a lot better than what we see out of a lot of other teams trying to just go ahead and come back from the depths of hell.
Especially considering the fact that we said that too much of LA Tech was really being revolved around one single player, and Danster was going 1-7 at some point, Dallas, right? Something had to change. The straw had to break the camel's back for Danster at some point. And this dimensional drift, for a minute there, was actually very concerned because it looked like they were just doing the exact same thing they did in round 5, where they just tossed it towards pillar on B site. They changed it. They went to the back of screen. They prioritized the player that was going to obviously push them first. That was going to be Taiga for the side of Kentucky. And then they turned their attention towards the Rays, who had Spike in their hand. Fuzzy was no longer a matter of concern if you have that extra assistance with the flash from your player from up above and your own relay bolt there afterwards. LA Tech finally look like they have all 5 players, and they still have Hayes to kind of lead them up. But Narp, how much assistance that utility gave them that prior round and how much stall they had on site, no longer a matter for this round, as Kentucky immediately rushed them up towards tower. Do not let that jump peek go uncontested and finish off their frag.
Yeah, we saw no allocation of players or manpower towards that A ramp. I mean, going ahead and getting an idea that a push is going to be coming through. And I mean, when you're looking at UKY, I mean, they press the W key. I mean, they understand that that is what statistically works more for them. And that's what got them to this stance where they're already guaranteed an advantage at the end of the half. They want to make sure to monopolize them. I want to find a little bit more. Already going ahead, forcing that order again, making players push. You have a raise there. What I don't understand is why we don't see a paint shell waiting for these players at the end of Armageddon. But guess what? Gun barrels can do just as much as long as the shots are landing, and they've done that so far. The 1v3 situation, Elijah, 1 and a second, and that last singular player is going to be Fudge. Kai's already done a very good job of finding all the kills necessary so far, but in this situation, when it matters, you got to land those shots and can't do it. But the time was there, the spike was down, went down fast enough to get the job done and find themselves at 8-4.
Switching sides.
I love seeing that Armageddon used so wisely there, Das. But yes, a paint shell alongside it would have done wonders for them. That's something that Kentucky can look at for the later stages and say, okay, this was great. We won the round. But what could we have done slightly better? And that's going to be the things that drive a lower tier 2 team up to the upper echelons of a high tier 2, even low tier 1 team, right? Teams that can look at rounds, even with successes, and say, what could we have done more to make that an even easier victory and not have any sweat off our back? Never have let that come down to a 1v1 or anything in the state of giving them even a chance to shoot back at us. But Kentucky dominate the first half, a string of 5 in the central stages of the round, giving up 2 in the 3rd and 4th, and giving up 2 for the 2 of the final 3 that came forward, and then the recovery for that 12th round. Kentucky feel in control, but they will now have to play against a very, I would say, deliberate offense out of LA Tech, having the Taeho, having the Yoru, and even the Vise to make it so that postpoint is even more difficult to play in, as they can just central up their own site.
I do love this placement even more so. I mean, put the Taeho not only towards that bottom rope, but I mean, making sure that they can cover that A main area and go ahead and cover that heaven. That's where you see a lot of tier 2 and tier 1 teams allocate their Taeho, because that mini-map can cover so much of the map. But you want to do it in the most kind of like intersectional area where it has the most effect, it has the most diverse kind of capabilities of what it can really bring to the table. So already going ahead and doing some good job, good damage onto these players at LA Tech, and especially in the likes of a pistol round. That puts Taiga in a situation where, even though with only 23 health, look at the 49, look at the other, I mean, look at the Hyoru already sitting at what could also be around 23. It's that situation of a singular shot. That's these differences and these utility plays that just really set the tone for how easy these run-throughs can be. Already Fudge, we've talked about this guy, we've seen what these Taehos can do, and just able to drive that point home. Here's Hayes, the other Taeho, alive, but not really well. Already only sitting with 5 HP. It makes it a very easy run forward, but just not taking the shot. With 3 players alive, though, and a heal on hand, this is where Fussy has to be shining up. So we didn't really see this guy being spotlighted too much on the attacking side like you'd like your duelists to do, but here's a chance on the retake where you say, this is also kind of should be my home territory.
Taiga pings out Narp, stepping back towards back of B's side in Cubby. One central and alley, and Hayes has very little HP. Cleanup crew for both, but getting enough damage off to Fussy despite the heal from Taiga now puts Taiga in a very desperate 2v1 with little to no HP. Cannot regrowth themselves. One enemy on both sides. Great flick up to Narp, but Elijah was full HP, using Narp as bait. and gets that 5th round for LA Tech and starts off this second half in a very different manner than they did the first, actually winning out the pistol round, which should expectantly give them this second on top. But it will not be an easy endeavor with the way Kentucky have been playing. Hayes has so much weight and responsibility on their shoulders, but even when Hayes is in a spot where it's a 2v1, like off towards Male Dallas, somehow, some way, they always manage to win out, either getting a kill, as it was a 3v1 initially, or just stalling enough to be able to escape back towards site and be valuable in the later stages like they were with the shots off towards Fussy, who was extending out away from the backside of Alley on B.
Already nice, quick little gunfights going through. Not too much really come out of it, but I mean, even in Kentucky, they're just fighting for these orbs right now. They're trying to get this Armageddon to work with. I mean, it literally kills and gives you so much. So I mean, considering that it's going to be a priority target for a lot of these teams. I mean, we saw LA Tech do the same exact thing during their initial part of the last half. I mean, going ahead, looking for that emphasis, looking to go ahead and grab what they can, but you got to make sure that where you don't have those ult orbs, or where you've already picked them up, better yet, at least make it worth your time. Since you found that space, since you found that control, gotta make sure to hit those shots off the top.
Any flash to come through. Again, though, we'll just take a couple steps back and try to reevaluate. 3-on-4. Yes, the disadvantage is there for Kentucky, but enough players stacked over towards tower, waiting for the smoke to dissipate. Could give them an easy right click with the classic off towards the Yoru, but Dansters just gets the step back. Able to now engage off in a separate space. Has the assistance from the Astro not too far away. Cornball can try to cut off that sight line for the time being. Maybe give Taiga a sneaky opportunity here with the Guardian. Trying to cut off this angle. It means it's a 1v1 on site as long as Taiga can continue to control this. But Elijah and Dansters know they can just tandem swing. Elijah able to get that refrag instantly with the Ghost, and Narp just has to hold down sight. No way can Cornball be able to engage with the objective. They know that, and they want exit frags, and they get their one. No way will Narp give up a second. No way, Narp. Doesn't matter. Cornball does enough, and Kentucky, I would argue, win despite the loss in this second round.
Yeah, I mean, it's an exact repeat of what we saw during that last half. I mean, keep in mind, remember, we saw so many guns being ripped out, but that wasn't during the bonus. That was during the third round when a bye was coming through. So, I mean, that makes chances even better for Kentucky in this next round. Understand that they've ripped 4 out of 5 guns out. Understandably so, knowing that rifles can be carried into the next. We don't see 3 Bulldogs and a Guardian. We see a bit more. Well, actually, oddly enough, we do see the same thing. If anything, we see more, but they've had to invest so much more because of it. But with how they've been and knowing they're on the attacking side and getting every single plant down thus far, they got some bonus to work with. They still got some spare cash in their back pocket. So it's a pretty good sitting for LA Tech, all things considered. But Kentucky, they understand that, well, what could be setting the pace here is an Armageddon that's literally 2 ticks off.
Oni will have maybe a gun they can rip away from Kentucky. There it is. But Oni is just responsible for holding this. But if they can get into A main Dallas, arguably this sets up LA Tech to make the rotate easily through sewer. But Fudge wants to make sure there's no chance the rifle can be collected. They'll even move further. Jump is a little bit ill-timed. Thankfully, Oni doesn't collect the shot up just in time. And will be an easy fallback to continue to toss that rifle towards spawn. It's already moved back for Fudge. No way for Oni to step through. And it'll be a hit for LA Tech off through B. 3, sorry, up through tower. A 4th, not too far behind, over towards Garage, trying to lay this crossfire. But with that smoke that was placed by Kentucky, it'll be a little bit longer to wait out that Viper smoke. And Viper's still on side. Magnetic gets Dansters, hoping for more. Able to strip Elijah. That's a 2-for-1. Insane value for your Viper on site. And now with the Tejo utility coming out from Fudge, who has made the pivot away from the A site, they can stall even longer. Taiga off to Oni. No Sentinel for sight. Continue to spray from the box. Hayes in there, and you get the best for LA Tech. And now it's just one sole man. Narp, 36 HP, chased down now by the Tasmanian Tiger, trying to flash out for themselves, but it's direct on site pressure. Narp trying to force them away, but it's just not happening. Kentucky's Tiger almost single-handedly brings justice to this LA Tech offense that takes that site.
Help a girl out, would you?
I'm genuinely shocked we didn't see Oni kind of go ahead and commit to that B-side push. I mean, even better to get all the way wrapping around the map instead of just going ahead and committing right back down the middle. I mean, considering that already, I mean, you look at how much effort that was being put there, that's the play you got to keep in check. It's going to be Hayes. It's going to be Fudge. It's going to be these 2 Tejos. And I mean, when you already took attendance, you already found your 1 pick, you get traded off there as a Sentinel, who cares? What do you have to offer over on site? You need to be somewhere. You need to be putting yourself in these shoes to say, I need to be a nuisance to the highest player. I don't need to kill the guy, but I need to be able to keep tabs on him. I need to go ahead and be that PI, that man letting you know every single step he takes. So by the time he gets on site, we feel much more comfortable because we understand rather than just seeing these massive salvos come right in your direction saying, well, we may be cooked now. Because if you have that mental preparation, if you know where these guys are, if you know that you can go ahead and push up towards spawn, cut them off rather than having to go ahead and wait on site, just shaking, trying to guess when he's going to come next. I mean, it's just small things like that. But looking at a round like this, already nice little exchanges. Kentucky trying to step things up once more, find themselves another round to play with. The last one was a great one, and already Fuzzy starting off this one with shining colors, able to find one and understanding that this may be the time to get out. I respect every single bit of it.
Yeah, you get a free kill, and even if you do die there, Dallas, a judge isn't going to be the perfect weapon for LA Tech on the offense. So you don't give up too much. It'd be strong, but it's not going to be as valuable when you're holding tower from up above and trying to linchpin essentially that site. LA Tech Blue don't really have that safety net just yet to A. They're playing this macro game, but the ultimate orbs on the map. They're one away from the Cosmic Divide. Narcnarp's also one away from Rolling Thunder. They gave Hayes the one off towards B. They used the salvos, the regen utility, to ensure that they could get that safely inside Garage, which is something Tejo does, I think, is kind of underappreciated, having that ability to regen that and just stalling out time for the round and gain these ult orbs. There was no counterance from it from Kentucky, but Kentucky will fall back, letting LA Tech try to take over tower. They know they're not too far away from them, and they know it's just a matter of time so they can get some shots back the other way, and there's just no chance to get the spike down safely. One player up to tower could have shut that down, but they're not ready for it. Narcnarp didn't get there in time, tried to get it into the cubby, maybe should have just jumped a little sooner, tried to plant it a little sooner. Who knows? But Kentucky will get a 10th, reach double digits, and force LA Tech again to go for a timeout.
Yeah, I mean, good effort, nice kills off the back of it, but I mean, keep in mind, there's an objective at the end of the day, and that has to be the foremost priority when it comes around to looking at this match. I mean, LA Tech understandably taking a timeout here, their second one inside the game, to kind of figure out what exactly they're missing, because I mean, there seems to be a lot of loopholes there. At the beginning of the game, it was kills. Now it's a bit of a perspective problem. And over and over and over again, we're seeing these small little lapses in judgment that just really kind of bleed through and allow Kentucky to find themselves some easy kills because they're just too concerned about some things that just prove to be too much of a problem. Whether it be a singular player going off on a tangent like we see out of Fudge, or whether it be a Sky flashing things in front of you, or whether it be a Viper wall that's going ahead and that you're not expecting because your team didn't bring that to the table, or whether it be a Raze going ahead, being faster on the retake compared to something like Yoru with these flashes and knowing when the guy's going to be swinging. There's just a lot here that LA Tech just kind of has at the top of their mind, and it shouldn't be there. It needs to be an afterthought. It needs to be something they have shut down prior, something they've already accounted for, and that's why they're giving themselves a minute to figure out how they can keep those variables in check, but better yet, how they can manipulate that, how they can find themselves that space, so by the time the spike already is down, they understand that now our priorities do make more sense because the most important thing on this half is already taken care of.
Pool 3 is arguably one of the tougher pools in the Tier 2 scene for SEL. Georgia Tech being alongside them, having to do with UK White, LA Tech Blue. I mean, there is a lot here, and we haven't really seen much from USC. Hopefully, oh no, they had to forfeit their other game against Georgia Tech as well. I don't even know if USCB is participating as much here for Pool 3. They haven't yet through 2 games, but even just having Georgia Tech here and UKY and LA Tech, right? These are 3 monsters for Tier 2 that we've looked at and kind of feared. And Kentucky obviously are scraping through this first map and are trying to prove that LA Tech, their loss against Georgia Tech in a close one, maybe gives them a shot as they head into next week, February 27th, to take down Georgia Tech. And they go for their back-to-back to go 3-0 through this pool. They have to get through this battle first, and they get their first blood. No refrag back just yet if you're LA Tech. I'm sorry, if you're UKY, LA Tech got their first blood. And they're just going to use that free kill to force the dangers, the defenders for UKY over to the A site to try to make up for that loss. This is where that utility for LA Tech will send out. There's the Cosmic Divide, a TP from Dansters into the back of site. Didn't get exactly the cubby I think they were wanting, but other side of it nonetheless. And now it should be a free plant. This one planted for a garage hold as they don't want to stand behind the cubby where the Viper Snakebite was standing.
Even then, I mean, speaking of Viper, I mean, Magnetic making a trade with the Bulldog from what we saw earlier on where Oni found that kill with the Vandal in hand. So, I mean, you got to look at these guys and what they're doing. I mean, they're managing it, but that's going to force the hand of LA Tech here. They have to play this a little more conservative, but even then, as I say it, the second it ultimate comes through, I understand they are desperate for this round. They want this round. I cannot blame them at all. knowing the economy's in their hand, knowing the push is coming through, knowing they have something to work with, this is the time to get it done. They're going all in for it. Already the third one coming out, a fourth one available, and able to shut it down. But who is the one shutting it down? It is Oni again and again and again and again and again for a 5-piece, making the ace, clearing out the entire round, starting on the opposite side of the map to get things going.
I mean, look at this way this takeout from tower side. Oni has to deal with Seekers, has 2 players dropping, and Armageddon is hitting to the back of site. So much was there. Oni's able to isolate one right after the Seekers tag. They use their ultimate, essentially forcing everyone for Kentucky to have to fight them face up with a pistol. And Fudge having no chance, still having their weapon ripped out of their hands by the Vine Thorns, the Razor Thorns, whatever the heck they're called for the ultimate. Force. Once again, only a shorty in their hand. That range, sometimes it's just perfect, Dallas. Sometimes it feels just right, but that one was a little bit too far for your player of Fudge on Kentucky, and LA Tech etch ever closer. Now 7-10 the score, and Kentucky do not have the weapons they would like as they send 3 players hoping to isolate Oni, and they get a lot of damage to them. That's 30 HP remaining, but the whole team knows there's 3 there, and they're just gonna send themselves through the B side, really giving Dansters up to take position, but that's an easy player, an easy duelist to give space to. The rest of the team can just start to lay the smokes afterwards and get a free plant.
Yeah, I mean, Oni has really shifted all of the attention of themselves right now. I mean, especially after that last round, the great steel guard to go ahead and shut things down, understandably so. I mean, you're putting the guy not only back into an ace scenario where, okay, they have it again once soon, but I mean, even right now, putting the Reds into a scenario where saying they're allocating 3 towards me. I am that big of a threat. It may not even matter because finally, when you get back on the site, you're not seeing the guy that aced in the last round. You're seeing just a singular individual, Elijah, not even really within area to contest this spike, just going ahead and doing the concussions, doing everything they can to deny. But I mean, Fussy having that showstopper in hand. The player who has been basically dead for the past 3 rounds, dying for that ult orb early on, has now actually found some effort from those ult orbs, knowing that you're that much more ahead in rounds where you can take those sacrifices.
This is a crazy, crazy round overall for Kentucky to pull out of nowhere to win. Obviously, the showstopper from Fussy was down to the last second for it to be sent out, and Elijah they were forced into a bad spot. You have to swing there. You have to get to site for where it was planted. It was planted for a garage hold, and I do like the idea of putting Oni closer into site because they want to put down the wall. They want to have the utility for their flash on objective and be actually successful in a post plant in sentineling up there. Leave the Astra back to kind of dictate the pitch, so to say, and control the objective from utility at range, which is what Astras really thrive with. But when you have 2 agents that do that well, Tejo and Astra, somebody has to get the short end of the stick, and it just, unfortunately for both sides, for Kentucky and for LA Tech, it's going to be that Astra, and I just think LA Techs are getting the worst end of it, trying to hit that B site more often, where Kentucky would just bouncing over and over again to the A site, pressure towards mid and then an A hit, pressure towards mid and then an A hit, one player towards B, then an A hit. So much there. As what in the world is going on for Hayes? That is Fussy just really getting caught out. That is a dastardly first death to take for Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Fussy just be an absolute victim when it comes over here to the A side. I mean, whether or not it actually be and execute towards the A side, we've seen Oni once again over and over and over again just completely slam that 1v1. And I mean, you got to see a point where Fussy, I mean, on the A side, honestly, you allocate this guy towards mid, towards B, just get him off somewhere. I mean, sure, it's some information, but I mean, put the guy in a different situation where he doesn't feel like he's in just a rut constantly. But still, even with that singular player dying pretty often, Kentucky's still in the lead nonetheless. So great effort so far, but with the Bucky and the close quarters situation of pushing all the way through thus far, knowing you found that kill over towards A earlier, you know they're going to be down a man, and you know it should be a much easier plan to work.
Mitchell Drift, the VTOL to get information. Fudge has not yet been spotted out by it here towards the corner. Relay bolted out, trying to get one more. Fudge completely flashed, but poor turn by Danster, doesn't matter. Fudge beyond the grave has their salvo take down the doppelganger of Hayes as Narpnop sneaks through the smoke and deals with Magnetic. Elijah hoping to maybe catch Cornball off guard. It's the last player left standing, and it should be an easy tap or 2 to deal with their own doppelganger of the Astra of Cornball, and LA Tech make up for the loss in the previous round, which was an eco round, might I add, for Kentucky, and force them back into the same exact spot where they are now stuck in an eco, with only Fussy and Fudge being able to full buy here and kind of forcing the team to make a decision. They have 2 ults. Those ultimates aren't something like a Tour de Force style, something like a Showstopper, something like a Blade Storm that can, you know, rely on to get kills instead of something like a weapon. They're going to have to pray that they get some kills, then use the ultimates like a Viper's Pit to lock down site because they got to get control of it first.
And even then, I mean, that was such a great start. Already understanding, I mean, Fudge pushed up through site instead of pushing back instead. So, I mean, we already see that just once again, that was the last player there on site. Allows you to push it back towards screen, have a player allocated where Narp was, and even then knowing that, I mean, panic
One enemy remaining.
I mean, just over and over again, we're seeing Kentucky just start to panic here, thinking like the comeback is going to be inevitable. Like, they're not going to find themselves an opportunity to really go ahead and close out these rounds going forward. So they're trying to just kind of push the problem towards LA Tech, but you're on the defensive side now. They're just going to run somewhere else and put the spike down. You're going to be forced to come to them no matter what. You're going to be ready for these gunfights because that's 2 kills that are just stringed together by a singular player and seemingly collateral. I think both of them literally almost were, and you found at least penetration damage from both. You can't get overzealous. You can't start freaking out here. You got to understand the problem at hand. It's not as big as you will it up to be.
This game Cornball is wrapped around no longer by the Astra of LA Tech, but instead by Hayes, who is now a 21-16 monster. We talk about raid bosses a lot. Me and Dallas are big MMO fans, but Valorant is an FPS at its first and foremost, but sometimes you have that one individual that goes above and beyond the rest of the team that you look at as everyone else is just the ad clear you have to get through to be able to fight the big boss at the end of the day. It's Hayes for LA Tech Blue, and it's Fudge right now for Kentucky. But at least Fudge has great assistance from Taiga, who was so darn good, Dallas, in that first half. Started well in the second, but it's getting tougher and tougher as the rest of the team for LA Tech are starting to really improve in leaps and strides of this second half and the end of their attacking positions. Kentucky are not having as many freebies. Fudge maybe hoping that a free TP will be taken. We have seen this one actually now multiple times from Dansters. They want to try to get this first kill first. Fudge being forced to fall back slowly, and they'll salvo maybe the ult orb. That would have been the time to try to do so, but instead waiting, hoping that it was a bait, and then holding on to the utility for the time being.
Even more so, I mean, it just comes down to right now. I mean, both the duelists really are not playing the game. They're not here to play. Dansters and Fuzzy both sitting at 8 and 9 kills respectively, while the rest of the team has nearly doubled of what they do. So, I mean, we got to see these duelists really start to play the game, and obviously LA Tech in a better schoolhouse for that, considering that, I mean, you're on the attacking side. Yoru's supposed to be able to do that. This is a half that they're supposed to really just kind of light up and turn on. But speaking of these duelists, look at the adjustments. I was going to go ahead and mention Fuzzy. Already being back towards screens. Understand that ult orb is not worth my life every single round. We've seen 4 rounds nearly, not back to back, but where this guy was getting popped off instantaneously. Doesn't even get the chance to play the game and even then have an impact over the course of the round, because by the time the retake comes around where you're supposed to be there, first and foremost, working off of Fudge's utility, you're just not.
Again comes in. Ball needs to try to get a second frag. Does so because Fudge doesn't win their one, but you now dealt with Hayes, the raid boss proverbially for the LA Tech roster, as Elijah tries to swing through a smoke and Magnetic gets the better end. 10 seconds of ticking. Narp must stick this, and the guiding light doesn't go far enough to actually flash as Fussy wants to engage. Roomba around the corner, hits the corner instead, and this is a very poor attempt on utility, and they lose Tyke on the drop down from above. Rolling Thunder counterance. Oni putting the vines and thorns down on sight. And it is just dominance for LA Tech with this utility. The sentinel choice of Oni, and Oni's performance in these last 6 rounds has just been a monster to deal with for UKY. It's no longer just Hayes. The team is biting against this Kentucky team.
It's so unfortunate, too, seeing how all that just kind of unwound. I mean, especially from the perspective of Fussy. We saw that paint shell bounce around to where there was always already a snake bite in that garage plan that was available. I mean, your players are already checking that from heaven, saying that understandably, you don't need to place this thing here. You need to run towards that box. You need to throw it right there in that cubby and force that breach out. Get that damage off. And even then, the boom bot right afterwards, not even going around that corner where you just saw him go. Instead, bouncing off and going in the opposite direction where that could have been potentially a free swing or a kill, because either the gun kills or the boom bot does. I mean, it's simultaneous. So, I mean, just too much going too wrong. Exact same time there, and at such a critical point where we see LA Tech now find themselves only in a 1-point delta. I mean, they just found so much value off of that one last round, knowing that, I mean, from our perspective, I feel like we shouldn't have.
Spike down.
Oh my God.
He wants it.
They do not want to let LA Tech ride through the double digits up to 12 and even a 13th on top. Kentucky do not want to be gate kept at 11. They just need to get to 12 and then force overtime and try to play to the second few stages. Narp. The assistance from Danster will wrap around through bottom elbow. Fussy inside of screens will be stunned. Will not be initially contested. Great covering and just enough damage to get Dansters and an assistance to Narp. It's one left. Trapped inside of A main. We know where Elijah's going to be. That's always where the Astra has stuck. And now they're being pressured to move forward, trying to change out weapons for the reload. Fudge sticking in this even further. They can't spray nearly enough bullets, and Fudge just does what's necessary. Stick the deep fuse, burn through Elijah's HP, and put Kentucky now at match point.
I feel like that's a magnetic call too, going ahead and Tyga especially just saying, look, hold that thing down. I mean, I've already found my 2. Sure, a couple missed shots right there towards that cubby. It does not matter. I'm playing time here. Fudge is getting the defuse off. By the time he even pushes me, he's not going to be able to lap around. They planted it so far back and such a convoluted spot that they're not going to manage to find that kill afterwards. They didn't plant it towards that closed cubby out in the open to give it that heaven coverage. They tucked it back when to give us that opportunity to find us that point and find us that round, because that's where they were forced to put it in the first place. So great attempts, and even then more so when you look at the kind of purchases, but better yet, the ultimates available in this kind of scenario. Sure, there's not an Armageddon. Sure, there's not a Viper's Pit. And sure, there's not a showstopper to play with. But you have a positive vibe for that retake. And you have Seekers early on to give you an idea of where these lurking players could be. I'm surprised they didn't pop it over towards the A side to understand that Oni more than likely is going to be there once more, allocate towards that side, where even then, keep in mind, I think that was the round that we could see them over-allocate. Find that 3-player rush towards Oni on the A side. Throw down those Seekers, give it up to B, and then guess what? They're just charging in behind these things, understandably so, because there's no Sentinel to set up and slow them down when they get on site.
Scout
Spinning Tiger out into space, spots away Danster. Danster will get a flash towards Fussy, but Fussy has no problem with that whatsoever. Utility is obviously a concern. LA Tech were trying to play that macro battle, looking like a micro battle. Only 2 rounds remaining for those ult orbs. The one towards Garage they used a lot of utility for. Counter it out. Snake bite in the Viper's cloud to try to stall it, but Fudge just sprays through a toxic screen and deals with Haze. Fussy does get the wraparound through rope up to Elijah, and it's just turning up green in the feed. Kentucky 4 now, frags for their name, and make the 13th for your side flawless, why don't you? As your map pick, as dicey as it turned into in the second half there, Dallas, will eventually fall to you nonetheless. 13-10, our final score.
Yeah, great stance there by Kentucky towards the end, but it took them a long time to get there, which is going to be a big problem considering, I mean, split. You look at this map, you look at what's been done by it, and I mean, they were supposed to kind of win this thing in a more definitive manner, knowing it was their selection, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a bit problematic in the long term of things. I mean, a great start, all things considered, but I mean, looking at even in the compositions, knowing that, I mean, while sure, LA Tech does have more experience with that, running it and feeling comfortable in those scenarios, there still felt to be a couple boxes that were missed. I mean, because keep in mind, every composition, you are sacrificing something for something else. And while Oni was such a huge fragger, the only time there was like 1 or 2 situations where I'm like, this Vise makes a difference. I mean, the Steel Garden example, when we saw Oni on that ace for a round, saying, look, I'm in a bad spot. Things are getting really bad. I'm just going to go ahead and nerf everybody around me. And then this should be a much better gunfight for me to go ahead and capitalize and finish off. Because this is probably going to be the best chance. We don't know whether they're planning over towards Garage, planning for actually playing on site. We never really know where these players are allocated, especially with an Astra constantly off site. That's not going to be affected by this to play the defender's case if my other teammates can't shoot back. So it's one of those things there where, I mean, while Kentucky was looking good and while they did win the map, it was by such a close and narrow margin that if we do see LA Tech able to go ahead and step up and fill in those gaps a little bit closer, better yet, a little bit faster, because they did take a while to really get on the board considering that first half kill. It just, it could be a completely different ball game. But as it stands right now, it's down 0-1, and the team that was holding the torch up to the likes of the big boy that is Georgia Tech in this Tier 2 scene, they don't look nearly as unstoppable right now.
Yeah, and I made the speculation early, Dallas, that maybe they thought they could get a free ban for Split in round 2 for the ban phase, right? For the last 2 bans, their last ban before the decider map is decided. Yep. And maybe this was kind of a sneak peek by Kentucky to kind of lock it in. Despite that, the scoreline was really not as bad as you'd expect for a team that would have wanted to ban this, right? Or maybe would have made the argument that this is a round 2 ban for them. 13-10 is absolutely nothing to scoff at, especially with how difficult Split tends to be, where one side tends to be kind of a slugfest, where you kind of just get beat around the bush and you have to make a huge recovery for the second. And they got the worst end on the first half for them. So I'm impressed, even with this loss. And now they get to head over to their map pick to see if something changes. And I do have confirmation. Corta, who's the captain for the Georgia Tech team, straight up said they banned it in their series in week 1. So this is a map that they wanted to ban, or likely did want to ban, and did not want to experiment with, and had to here this week. But map 2, they picked it. They wanted it. We'll have to see how they perform on it. But after a break, we'll see you guys when it's ready to get underway. there's so many things we could kind of digest and break down into about the problems and boons that came through on map 1, but Split is its own monster. It's its own being, and we're going to throw it off into the corner. The only thing we will remember is that it was a victory for Kentucky, and the stat lines will show a 1-0 start. And if they take our second map, then it's a 2-0 victory to rout through LA Tech Blue, who was anticipated to be one of the best teams here for the SEL, but seemingly has gotten the worst end of luck, being dealt with a tough as heck pool with Georgia Tech and now Kentucky sweeping through and having so much success.
Well, if you take the League OS, I mean, the API's there, the stats are there. You can tell at least who was a big harbinger in a lot of those problems for map number 1. But I mean, looking at going forward, I mean, seeing what's happening, I mean, in the second map, it's going to be no different of a story realistically. I mean, you're going to see the momentum carry on. You're going to see that same agent selection come through just because of what that guy can do. So knowing that at least Fudge and Hayes, those two big impact players of both sides, not only just in the kill department, just in terms of what Tejo can do in general, I don't think we're going to see anything too crazy in that regard. It comes down to the rest of the team. We saw Oni, though, light up very late into the game, having at least obviously that one ace, but even then still more so being a one-man army, always taking on 1v2s, 1v3s over towards that B side, forcing this problem and saying, look, here's something here. I mean, I'm taking down Fussy every single round, making sure the guy can't play the game. And what do you know? The first round, it feels like he can actually play, allocated all the way back towards screens. What do you know? Finds a 2K, working with Hayes to close out the game. So it comes down even less to shutting down the duelists because, unfortunately, they haven't had too much of an impact in the series just yet. You just got to make sure everybody else is shooting as a collective.
Yeah, and I know I mentioned earlier, but I think collective is just such an apt description for what needed to change in the early stages for LA Tech. And obviously it's a monster having to deal with that side first on Split, but they obviously got a whole lot better winning out round 10, winning out round 11, giving up round 12. It's whatever. You got your 4 that you wanted for the first half, and that made things manageable. But imagine if they had to kick that into high gear just a couple rounds prior and how close it got there towards the end, 13-10, obviously. It very well could have been them claiming the victory on map 1. So we head over to their map pick now. Still, this one, a very solid choice for, I would argue, most teams, if not every team at this level of play. It is Lotus. It feels like the new Ascent in a lot of ways, but it's still a 3-objective map, so differs in some capacity. And it is a actually viable map to try to plant down on B site with the right strategy, with the right agent selection. And something like a Clove, something like a Breach, something like Tejo, which is almost a guaranteed pick for this map, are such strong facilitators of a possible B push, and leaves that ever-present threat that is something that an attacking team will bring forward, as they are teasing away, it seems like, the Tejo for our attacking side here of Kentucky. So. Fudge will likely stick that, but I think it's a big question about what their second duelist option, if they want to play a second duelist, or if they want to try to tease off to a different style of
they're going to run Tejo, yeah.
I don't know if KJ is as valuable anymore as she used to be for this map, though. I almost feel like Vi steps up exceptionally strong for Lotus.
That was exactly what I was going to say. It was oddly enough, and even then, I mean, KJ still very much is viable, very usable in that regard. But I mean, that's if you're going for a double sentinel setup. I mean, everybody feels relatively interchangeable, but I mean, Vice on this map has kind of become more so the mainstay of a primary sentinel when it comes around to Lotus, just purely because of the flashes, because of the kind of denial, and you feel a little bit more like a duelist in terms of these gunfights, where you can actually flash yourself off whenever you're holding this thing down, or you can lock these players off, isolate those 1v1, slow things down. I mean, you have things to work with. But I mean, the KJ, you're relying purely on your utility. You can't really trade yourself nearly as much. The swarm grenades don't do nearly as much when you look at having, omens and raises and things like that can bypass all this utility. And I mean, the Cypher, the KJ is more so as a secondary, because on this map, it very much is not terrible of an idea to have a secondary sentinel as your starting lineup, considering that you need to have a player not only allocating on, both ends of the map, or you can go ahead and double down towards the B and the C or B and A. But knowing that even then, when it comes around to the attacking side, better yet, the sight lines for these sites aren't very far. They feel very, very close towards each other in terms of spawns and sight on the attacking side. So it makes it where you have one person watching the flank watch, because on this map, you're going to see it all the darn time. And then you have a player actually on site setting things up.
Wow, well, that's a crazy trade for Dansters to get there. Was a little bit slow to start off. Our previous map was Split. Obviously, was a big factor for the successes we saw from LA Tech in the later stages. The closure for the final 2 rounds they took in the first half, and then the better defensive performance that they had or the better offensive performance they had overall, where they were getting a little bit more access out of the VTOL. But they didn't really get as much as they wanted. They trade out duelist for duelist in that capacity. which will slow down Kentucky's potential push through this round. But you still have a Tate, you still have a Fade, and Fade was argued to be kind of like a duelist on that release just because how much potential you had as an initiator for yourself. And Tejo does the exact same thing. So an extremely aggressive overall offensive lineup for Kentucky, especially when you combo that in, having that Clove who can resurrect themselves and have that overheal on top. It's just even more exceptional firepower for a team that's as confident as Kentucky seems to be with guns in their hand. It's going to be hard to fight that as they do get a good 2-for-1 trade in their endeavor to sight. Elijah is going to try to toss out something to destabilize the HP pool of the players and objective. Fudge is translated over to the lower side of pit towards drop for the plant, but doesn't decide to stick there and instead goes direct to sight while Magnetic and Cornball fight for those frags and win out to give Kentucky the first round win.
It's a good start here from Kentucky once more. Find themselves a pistol round. Obviously what they want. We saw are seeing an exact replication of what we saw during the map number 1. They don't go ahead and kind of find themselves on a relatively conservative eye. They go for the Bulldogs, the Guardians, and even then still Fussy, understandably so, trying to go for a bit of a force there. Understand that Tyga was shooting better in that last map, so understandably giving over that Phantom to somebody else, or what we're saying is just juggling all over the place. But I mean, I don't know. I understand that Fussy wants to get on the map. Understand that Fussy wants to wake up a little bit, wants to be that duelist, wants to pitch in and do their job on the attacking half of the map, but it's a round number 2. I think, you know, when everybody can be on the same page and go for a full buy, you find that Bulldog, you give that Phantom over to maybe another player who's been feeling on fire like Tyga or, you know, even then better yet Fudge, for example. But here we go. We're pushing in with it. You're leading the charge. This could be a gun to hand over, or this could be a gun to just go ahead and seal the deal.
And there's only so much the close modes can do if Kentucky just refused to respect those, especially when you can easily remove and renovate those sites. Having the Tejo Salvos force players out of Waterfall and back further through to the B side, you're just stacked up if you're LA Tech. There's nowhere to go except for forward, and the weapons just aren't going to be there. Kentucky will continue to lag back, play longer angles, and it's going to be a reliant stage of play to try to get those HPs lower using your Clove Util and some breach stuns on top. Hayes with the salvos doesn't get what they wanted. The classics go kind of crazy up close, and Hayes streaks out 2 before falling. A chance for your breach and your Clove to maybe steal away some chances, but the Hawk can make problems dicey, and you're now going to have to commit to the fact that you can't stick to the side of a salvo when a breach charge comes your way. It will be a round 2 victory for Kentucky, but 2 players down, maybe a third if Fudge can't get out of there in time. I think they'll be just fine. No, they aren't.
They're still going to pick up that Phantom.
Wow, the desperate move to grab the weapon costs them. They'll keep the Phantom.
It's enough.
That is
worth.
Oof. It is worth still. The $2,900 weapon.
I mean, considering that even more so, I mean, that player dies for the cause, but I mean, you're losing a Bulldog or an extra Guardian in the process. Carrying over a Guardian and a Phantom, those 2 guns alone are going to be enough to go ahead and kind of bog in off of each other in that next round. I mean, going ahead, tossing off the dead body, find the exchange, so you're fighting with it. It's going to be enough to give yourself at least a fight over towards A, knowing that you always see a player line up towards long. Or if you want to go for that B push, you want to go for that C push, you had the Phantom in the front, just like we saw during that last round where we didn't even see LA Tech contest Kentucky on that side with the Phantom in hand. By the time they get around to actually playing for a retake, if they opt for that once more, well, then guess what? They're already going to be close enough for those pistols. Find themselves already enough infinite to find kills.
Fussy will prowl close. Mentioned that for a lot of teams, B site's kind of just a mere formality of a site. You don't really try to go for anything. But with the right agent selection, it's extremely valued for teams either to use it as a way to close off Waterfall or just as a way to make sure that if there is a translation from A site and the rotate towards C, it's going to be a lot slower than we've seen before. That's where you see a lot of Vices kind of lagging closer to that B main, waiting for players to make the rotate when your team hits C and they have to go through B and Waterfall to get there. We're going to have that utility start to barrage the C site, and you're just going to see those LA Tech defenders engage into space. Oni, though, from up above, not on that Vice, the KJ, will be able to get a frag, and Fussy makes kind of a wrong choice about the direction to head into, only gets tagged by the special delivery, and manages to step away from the salvo damage, just barely yet, as Hage continues to send damage out towards Spike, but Kentucky managed to get it down, and even get a frag on top of it with the Bulldog, continue to hold the angle. Waterfall has 3 players pressuring. Oni gets 1 to trade it out afterwards. Magnetic needs to hit the headshot here, but just can't do it. And I don't know if this was enough damage dealt LA Tech to value this round for Kentucky. They get the spike down, maybe a couple of extra credits, and they've learned a little bit more about how LA Tech are going to try to retake this C site.
Yeah, I mean, able to go ahead and find themselves another kind of very confident, very quick push on the C side, which I really expected out of them, considering that last one that was being given up to them. But the hold just really wasn't there. Better yet, the timing was just lining up very well for him. Already finding all the necessary kills, but even more so as a follow-up, find the triple stack, going to 3v3 by that point. If you had all players who were flashed there for a second with Magnetic found that first kill, I mean, honestly, you have a shot of getting that spray down, finding those trades instantaneously, finding that little war, that little line of scrimmage, that 3v3 scuffle that just sets the tone. But it became a bit of a one side of the fair when the other two players kicked out, tried to lap around and assist in a fight that had way less allocated towards him.
Ace is in a bit of a spot where they're just trying to keep the space under claim it control as LA Tech want to fight for the ult orb. They'll get it. Kentucky will still stay over towards A main. They'll likely set up some KJ utility to make sure nobody can pressure through B main. And what a great use of the sentry drone there by Hayes alongside Danster's initial pressure to ensure that not only can Kentucky not stay inside A main safely, if they stay there, they will be dealt with in due diligence. As once again, Kentucky just refused to move down. They're staying stalwart. They want this A-sided take, and they're going to bait away that it will be a rotate, but LA Tech are still very committed to holding on to this. They have 3 players closer to Link, and they're having no problems dealing with LA Tech's pressure.
They most definitely aren't. Already just going ahead, finding themselves in just such a bad scenario, even then choked up back towards spawn, can't really go anywhere with it. This is the point where, once again, you're forced over towards the seaside. It's the time now when you have the nano swarms once again available, getting a good bit of damage off, nearly melting Fudge to death. Good God, and he still wins that fight. So long as you get that plant down, I mean, things are looking feasible here. You have an annihilation to play with, but so long as you don't find 2 more kills, it's not be warranted to whip the thing out. You're just praying that Magnetic can just be the saving grace you need.
Rotate now for LA Tech. You know, there's not very much in terms of obstacles in front of them. This is a dicey choice by Kentucky to try to wrap around back through Waterfall. LA Tech don't know. They have a perfect choice here, having Magnetic go and instead rotating Fudge closer to that side. You have to win this one, Magnetic. Falling back even further. Hayes will stick towards the defuse. Using the salvo for space. Masters just can't go further. And Magnetic gets their one off towards Waterfall, but like I said, you either had to get the second and try to take that space and claim it for yourself, or you had to hold the cover for Fudge to use their utility and their salvo on site. And both of those failed. One from a complete dischoice to step away from, and the other one making the commitment, but just getting out-fragged by Dansters, who, like we said throughout that second half, looked a whole hell of a lot better than their 1 in 7 performance they had in the first 8 rounds on our first map split.
Yeah, gotta wake up eventually, and we're definitely seeing that so far, at least in some regard. I mean, able to go ahead and, I mean, it's still early pickings, 4-3. I mean, there's a lot of game left to go, but I mean, considering that you at least kind of are relatively matching, and even then, better yet, outpacing what you had in the early stage of the last game, that's why it's still even. That's why it's still close. That's why it still looks good. That's why Econ still just seems relatively feasible between these two teams, because they're finding some even exchange and making these rounds close. And that's all that matters. But, well, a nice little spray through the smoke is unfortunate once again for Fussy, because speaking of duelists, this was the guy that was getting popped off again just immediately during that last match.
You have a plant that had to go in a non-default position, so you weren't slowed out by the breach utility. And even then, you have a great spot to try to hold on to this. You have to send a player through defender spawn and wrap back up towards upper heaven as Hayes gets ulted out by the Armageddon. Magnetic's even able to strip away Elijah's HP in the process with the Sheriff. The salvos can only continue to barrage towards site. One towards door link. That was Magnetic, dealt with by Narp. Up above his cornball. Now the only one left standing, and had a chance to maybe go for an ult as well, but time was never going to be on their side. Don't use it. You weren't going to get a shot in time, because it has like, what, a 2-second timer to even re-solidify afterwards. But man, Kentucky are gnawing at the butt, it feels like here, Dallas, to find success, and it is just LA Tech demoralizing even the chances that look really good, and even the ults that are expunged by Kentucky to try to find that.
Yeah, I mean, great looks here. Already once again, I mean, for Kentucky to go ahead and get that thing down, but better yet for LA Tech to kind of solidify themselves and start sustaining this game. I mean, we're seeing everybody shoot on the same exact regard. I mean, sure, Oni being a little bit behind, but I mean, that's not even a problem considering you're a Sentinel. I mean, you're getting overwhelmed on Seaside. You're on an island by yourself. So what does that show for the rest of the team? I mean, they're doing what they got to where they are. The B site being held, A site being held, kills being successfully found early on. But now we're seeing Kentucky once again understand that C site is looking the best for them. The last time they attempted it, they didn't have equal guns, equal arsenal to face off against with. So they're saying maybe if we try this once more, as long as this Armageddon doesn't just go ahead and flush everybody out and kill every single last one of us, this could be doable.
He's going to hold this angle. And he's going to have assistance from Hayes, and they'll both take different angles. Changing those sight lines will be valuable, and Hayes just overswings too soon. Oni doesn't get the chance to go in afterwards, and now it's just really Oni on that side to deal with, and Magnetic. We said how darn good they were on map 1. They were such a key figure for the Kentucky side, but they have to go even more crazy now on offense. Knock trying to work through, has Fudge direct on site to deal with Magnetic, falling further back closer to mound, but needs to contest. Oni just has a sliver to see them as Fudge takes and rips through Narp. 3 rounds now for Kentucky, tying things back up and stopping the hemorrhaging it felt like that was the success out of LA Tech.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to be seeing this for a pretty long while. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I mean, it's really just going to come down to somebody really stepping it up. And even better yet, it's surprising to see the Kentucky still kind of keeping up with everything. When you look at, I always talk about a team and they're only strong as their weakest link. I mean, Fussy, once again, still only being 1-6 to start off this game. Meanwhile, we saw, obviously, Dancer stepping up, now being in the opposite end of the board, flipping the script. They would go ahead and show, I mean, on the defensive side of the map, albeit, it's absolutely making the tear. Waking up now, showing that everybody still can shoot in some regard. But, I mean, who's going to find the consistency? I mean, after last map, some players seem like they won't find it at all by the end of the match.
Lockdown being put in play. AJ's viability as a Sentinel, this is arguably the biggest thing for them besides the nano swarms on site. Just trying to make sure that players take damage on the entry in, but I think it's better to isolate individuals with the Vice Wall instead. The lockdown can at least get you a free plant, or a free retake for all accounts. Oni maybe has a fight a little closer to home than they would like. Magnetic, though, gets their 1. They've been consistent about that the last 2 rounds, but they got 3 in the round prior, and they will only get 1 here. Showstopper out. Salvo tries to keep them away from sight, but Danster still gets no value off the back of this ultimate. Shots off towards Waterfall, 2 towards Defender Spawn. The Haunt will be cleansed, and Elijah will not be too far away from the dangers in front of them as Taiga. No longer on that sky, the fade, but the gun skills translate map to map. That's 3 in this round to elevate Kentucky.
Yeah, once again, I mean, finally flipping the script, getting themselves back to back. I mean, that's what you need. You need some kind of consistency. You need some kind of spree. You need to have a streak on hand for the sake of this money, but better yet, just to go ahead and find that score differential on this attacking side. I mean, we're going to see a lot of just kind of diverse plays as the later stages come along, but now as we're halfway through, I'm shocked to see that we still haven't seen LA Tech make too many pushes towards that spawn side. Because, I mean, it's pretty much a mainstay. It's very common practice on this map to push that spawn as a defender. And finally, swapping things up. I understand that when they're swapping things up, it's not around when they have much of a full buy. But they finally caught on and know that, well, this C site doesn't really look like it's being held all that much. No disrespect to Oni, but I mean, you're in a 1v3 scenario. You're not playing a Vice. You have nano swarms, and those go away. You're not able to really fight off the back of those. It does some good damage, but keep in mind, the last time we saw that push, Fudge ran right through it, got a lot of damage onto him, and then still ended up winning the gunfight. You need to make sure to give yourself a leg up as the shots are going down, rather than just kind of go ahead and set up a lot of precursors.
Congestion now, as Hayes is really having a great weapon to work with, and utility has already been sent, so they'll have to try to hope that Kentucky will play a little bit slower. Fudge will use the sentry drone. Nobody is fighting off towards A mid, and most of the A main side. The only one directly there will be either up in heaven or likely in the staircase, just behind the smoke that was placed moments prior from your clove. Showstopper out. Gonna try to make sure this clears out tree. Fussy has a choice. You go through staircase, or you try to go up through heaven instead. And let's send this up to upper heaven. Oni on the other side of this double box takes no damage from this as the salvo forces Fudge away from a very possible plant, and they'll send some back the other direction. Concussive goes out. Fudge just waiting. Sentry drone in. Yeah, you'll get spotted. Your location will be revealed, but the rest of the team does not. But they also don't win their fights. Danster gets a sheriff shot to Fussy. Magnetic has a lot of weight in their shoulders as 2 players come down through staircase and wasn't covering the shots from Elijah. Now you've got 2 players inside of Garden. A lockdown to make problems problematic, and Cornball has to take a swing to a spot that's being captively defused. There's no one there to stop it. The salvo that was sent by Hayes early to force Fudge away from the wall plant and closer to the inside hut plant not only was a way to buy time, but inevitably led Kentucky to make the biggest mistake of not planting for their players inside of tree.
Yeah, I mean, even then look at Cornball here, back and forth, back and forth. I mean, just really awkward gunfight, so nobody's even really looking his direction. He ends up winning the gunfight of the player that isn't looking his direction. Hayes ends up staying alive and then finally just knows that, I mean, there's nothing really holding back there. It's just so weird of an interaction that we don't see very often where you're expecting full committals from everybody. The lockdown, a great exponential of that. I mean, obviously, going ahead, giving that space, making these guys force themselves off site and giving themselves all the space necessary to find that defuse. And obviously, with it being as expensive as it is, getting it off and finding the actual use of it is great. But looking at those gunfights, I mean, it seemed like it almost wasn't even necessary because there gets to a point where desperation overrides the rights to life. You need to be finding these rounds. You know that things are going to probably go bad anyways. You know you're probably going to die in the process, and they're going to hunt you down in the post plant during those last 4 seconds. And you just kind of have to press W for the sake of, it's the best shot I got.
Desperation sometimes is what's needed. Kentucky may need to feel that desperation soon. Fussy has not had the best showcase for this map. They were generally middle of the pack, it felt like, for Kentucky. They were a good player. They led a lot of engagements early for them on splits, but a noticeable absence on an offensive side. We even said going into the second half that Fussy wasn't doing as much as you would say a duelist could. It's obviously being assisted by the fact that Fudge is stealing the limelight. That's what Tejos tend to do in the current state of the game. But it's just, when it's not a big scoreline difference and it's tied game, that disparaging difference between your initiator and your duelist just becomes even more obvious. We'll have to see this player elevate themselves. You know they can. They're very good. They have a lot of dangers left in front of them. Danster is very close by. Their player of Gurp stuck inside of tree. Fussy just gets double flashed in the process. Now you've essentially lost all of your A site pressure. You can start to maybe tease a different direction, leave your KJ behind, maybe stall out a possible rotate for a second chance opportunity when they hit that switch or exit away from sight, because you've let Taiga top a staircase, but you let Taiga try to go upper heaven on B, and I think that was the wrong decision. I think you just needed to play a little bit more time, as you will get a plant down on B. Yeah. But you get revealed on site. You didn't get the plant spot you necessarily wanted, and LA Tech have a rolling thunder where even if it was a big issue, you lost Magnetic, who was trying to hold out these two players in tree, which means it's just a 2v5. Dansters, down they go from Cornball. Cornball needs one more kill. They've got the ultimate, can maybe stall with it, but there's just no chance if you can't get another kill or two on top of it. It is a 5th round for LA Tech.
Yeah, I mean, just back and forth we go here once more. I mean, even then, didn't even have to expend that rolling thunder that we saw. Danster being one more closer to the showstopper, seeing that, I mean, this guy is now on fire, and just seeing what Kentucky's doing is not enough. But knowing that they've been relatively conservative in these ultimates, and even then more so, the economy hasn't been all that great. They've been kind of a flip-flop, which, I mean, albeit both teams have, they're still kind of, in terms of what they're maintaining and how they look relevant to LA Tech, you look at that scoreboard, and then you better yet look at the actual KD and the expenditures and the money. I mean, they had been surviving with near to nothing. It's at that point where, I mean, if you look at it from that perspective, that's got to be somewhat of a lighting into the tunnel. No, I mean, so long as you just step it up, this round could be great for you. And I wouldn't doubt it for this to be the round if they find at least maybe a first pick or two to just expend those ultimates just for the sake of saying, let's really drive this problem home. Let's really get things done here. And when you got the KJ, the top frag, Magnetic, with that Vandal in hand, you're hoping that he's going to be able to put in enough to really carry the rest of this and propel this round out.
Magnetic will try to maybe get a free kill off from the rotate through door. Whole team will have to get a smoke down there to keep the dangers away, but Elijah has a freebie peek. Now that puts LA Tech, who are already at a round advantage, Dallas up to a player advantage, and Kentucky will stall themselves out closer to Mound. Honestly, if you lose a player here, you kind of want it to be the Clove, if anything, because the Clove at least can either resurrect and give you back your full 5, or can at least put smokes in from beyond the grave and find value. Elijah trapped away, forced to move. The salvo's doing well, but Elijah still gets another kill there. Magnetic, impactful impactful player, arguably the most impactful for the C site plant and post plant, off the board. Elijah,
30 seconds
unreal
left.
performance to the
Spike
start and end of this
planted.
round, it feels like.
Yeah, 3 ultimates here, though, on the side of for Kentucky. I mean, going ahead, knowing them now, knowing the players that are allocated around. I mean, the Rolling Thunder coming out over towards that C main area, and the Armageddon flushing these players forward. This is the perfect time to go ahead and set up something like a paint shell or something to flush these guys out. But knowing that even then still, the Clove Resurrection comes out as well. This is a time of chaos. You're looking at this player, hoping the Resurrection comes through to find the shots, but you're just not going to get it there. And speaking of that player, Cornball need to find a kill and even survive by the end of the round, and still manages to do just that. Enough chaos for Kentucky to pull that thing out. Enough ultimates invested to say, well, it was worth it. While it looked good, it wasn't excessive. It wasn't unnecessary. And they find themselves a little bit, once again, of a bit of equilibrium. Saying 5-5, run it back. This game's supposed to be a one-man margin, and we have seen that so far.
Ooh, back and forth. The clock will tick. Time moves on, but the players refuse to. You have to take the losses on the chin, but sometimes you have to kind of say, a loss is a loss. We made those mistakes, and accept that maybe a player's position needs to change. I don't think anything has to change if you're Elijah Dallas. They single-handedly felt like they put LA Tech in the lead in that round, and somehow still Kentucky clawed their way back into success. But you're now in a spot where you get spotted here, and how far forward that you are, it's going to be really difficult to try to extend back into sight, and there it is. Cornball rips off Elijah's head. They had a chance to go for an ultimate there. They were hesitating to do so, but they will in fact go for it, and a wise decision by Kentucky to say, yeah, we just don't want to fight you. Why would we go here whatsoever? You're going to die. Fussy rips down 3. Salvos get even more damage off to 1, and LA Tech are now only left with Hayes, who, yes, is a problem, but are they a big enough problem to deal with 5? I don't think so. It's flawless thanks to Fussy appearing in the 11th round of this game.
In the half.
Now, swinging one by one out of B main, fighting this guy. I mean, this is the dude looking for redemption, looking for a reason to be ticked off after the performance in that last map. Saw a spark of hope during that last round, but it was nothing but being shut out everything prior. And it's been nothing but a showcase in this map so far. I mean, sure, we're seeing Cornball and Magnetic. It would have matched that same exact energy and on a more consistent basis. But I mean, this guy was literally 1 in 10 before that round. This is what we need. I mean, because look at Oster, able to go ahead and, once again, as I mentioned earlier, be able to play Raze, looking good, looking solid, sustaining themselves after that Yoru performance. But Fussy's the one that we need to see something out of this guy. And that could be the moment he says, I can shoot back. I can find kills. And that could be the one factor that sets Kentucky apart to drive this bigger than a 1-round lead.
Bunch wants to try to get a big crack here, and oh, you couldn't ask for a bigger one. Dansters goes for the showstopper, hoping to get a free kill off. Shut down instantly, and if you're Kentucky here, Dallas, you don't have to stay on C anymore. The job's done. They burned utility. You found the value. The breach is still an unknown, and that's like the last player I'm willing to peek when they can flash me out in a contested space, and I can theoretically lose a player when I would like to have them elsewhere on a site rotate in. Oni's hit by the Nightfall, forced to fall back. The Tendrils will give a lot of information away. Fussy will try to make sure nobody's closer to the backside of drop. The salvos will make that even more of a problem, as I don't think Hayes was close enough or really there to try to slow things out for the spike plant. They burned that a little bit too early, closer to B on the initial push from Kentucky, and they took advantage of that speed. Oni from up above, dealt with by the Phantom of Fussy. They've gone crazy, and they'll get another one for their troubles, though falling to them in the same fell swoop. The ultimate, use it or lose it, folks. It's the last round of this first half, and it's finally the time we're going to see a distance, it feels like, between these two teams, as Kentucky is just 2 kills away from a possible 7-5 half. As Elijah gives up some information on the peak, and Hayes tries to go for the spike tap, paying the price, and a tethered Elijah is stuck as the tendrils worm their way into their soul and lead them to the afterlife thereafter. It's 7 for Kentucky.
I mean, outstanding round, as I said once again. I mean, it's just a thing like that where you ask a player to step it up, feel good once more, just kind of regulate themselves, and that was it. Fussy still being at the bottom, sure, but managing 2 kills that round, able to get the showstopper, able to find a kill off the back of it, and it's just enough to tick things over the edge. I mean, we saw another situation like that right back in Split during that post-play scenario. When we saw that, I mean, keep in mind, when Elijah was trying to go ahead, get back on the site, contest, play that post plant, that's defuse that was going off, And the showstopper was there just as a complete denial, saying you're going to be somewhere, but we know you're over towards garage. So just shoot that thing out. It's enough to set the difference where not only is it a 2-round difference, the first one that we've really seen since that whole back and forth predicament of, playing, walking, taking steps along the scoreboard, but in a manner where finally it's sustained at the end of a half, where LA Tech, keep in mind, they haven't won a pistol round yet on this map, obviously, but they won the second one on the last map. So this could be a point of equilibrium once more where we just see this repeat, where they're the ones finding the first round, doubling down, getting the second, back and forth, back and forth. But it's the end that matters, and that lead right now, and especially in this kill department, to start things off for the second half, could be enough to really set the tone and just put a net.
Magnetic's just stuck out. The breach and successive just util barrage to them just makes things impossible to survive that rush. We do have Elijah getting one more for their troubles for LA Tech, but he's been kind of feeling themselves these last few rounds, Dallas, in comparison to the start, where once again you have somebody at the duelist who was LA Tech previously for Danster, and now you have your turnaround for Fussy, who are slow to get the ball rolling, and now have been arguably some of the most impactful players for their team overall. Fudge, first one to maybe take this swing, the salvo, just to try to create a little bit of space. Still send both players into contest as Fussy sticks this defuse, and nobody was close to Waterfall. Finally, Hayes will get there, but time has been bought. It's been stuck to half, and it's a free now round for just the two players to rush upon Hayes and deal with the danger that is now much less of a threat to them. 8-5 our score. The first time we see a 3-round difference in the entirety of this second map.
Yeah, and that's going to be big. I mean, knowing that Kentucky's probably going to end up winning the secondary round as well. I mean, just making it into a 4 and just carrying it on. I mean, that's the issue. That, I mean, LA Tech was able to bite back pretty quickly, sustain themselves. But, I mean, if it goes back and forth in the same exact regard, keep in mind they're going to have at least a 1-round difference now. If we do see that back and forth, we do see those 2 for 2s, and even then if we do see a 3-round to compensate and catch it back up. But guess what? We go right back to that pattern. Then we're going to see Kentucky win 2, then lose 2, then win 2. And that's still enough if we look at the patterns. Well, while we're on an even round standing, it's going to go ahead and clear things out. But as I said earlier, they're suspected to win this one. That's going to be 9. That's going to be odd numbers. And that's going to be a 13 before we even see an 11.
Chance here to put some pressure for LA Tech to the C side. Kentucky know that even though you're making a lot of noise, you don't have to commit, but you're a pistol. You're going to commit closely to the C site, and they don't have to fight this. Fall back, Magnetic. Wait for the team. 3 players to Waterfall, 2 will come from Defender's spawn, and the utility will be so simple for Kentucky to send their way. As Tiger just waits for the smoke to dissipate, waits for an engagement up close. Dansters does remove Magnetic, but you have 3 players extending through Waterfall. That crossfire is easy for Fussy, who gets 2 before getting felled by Elijah. As Hayes, stuck with Elijah, back of sight, can't get much further. But man, oh man, does LA Tech kind of get away with a final 2 frags there, making this at least more costly than it could have been, and leads to about a 60% loss in my mind for them. Yeah, you lose it, but look at what was lost for Kentucky's defense. They're going to only have 2 weapons to work with heading into the 3rd round. Do you force? I think they kind of go with stingers just to kind of even up some of the odds.
Well, because they didn't lose nearly as much as what we've seen in prior circumstances. They've always been buying up Bulldogs with a Phantom or a Vandal and kind of a little bit of a flex slot with a couple of Guardians to substitute those players that feel like they're fragging but can't really make the investment, and they're on defense as well. So, I mean, you can't really expect those kind of buys from them when they don't have the plant money to work with. So, knowing that they still won that last round, knowing that they're still looking relatively good, knowing that Fudge on round number 3 has an Armageddon to work with, I mean, I don't blame them for going ahead and still saying that money that we saved and earned off winning that last round, knowing we're on a spree to work with, that it's kind of worth it to just go ahead and throw this thing out there. Just throw everything you can at the wall in a difference like this, knowing that we're far enough ahead and can sacrifice those losses on a round-to-round basis, at least 2, per se.
2 suppressed.
And beyond that, well, it's going to look pretty good for them. They can say that that was worth it, knowing that Fudge is probably going to be getting another Armageddon by the time you reach that equal round standing.
Ball has an angle from up above, but as soon as you mention their name, Caster's cursing seems to come through there, Dallas. When he gets the better end of that fight, and now Tyga has to kind of hold that angle by their lonesome. What a clean scope that is for that Guardian, but they're going to have a whole lot of a cleaner shot afterwards. So it'll be avoided by the offensive LA Tech. Narc gets their frag to Magnetic with only a classic in their hand. And you do have the salvo to maybe deal some damage to Dancers, but how far away they sent that utility means that there's so much time to wait until it arrives. Means a free plant and no damage dealt on that rotate through. Oni's low. That maybe could have been a shot for Taiga through that box. But Fussy will have to just send a paint shell to the back of sight. Maybe getting damage. Doesn't roll the way they would have wanted it to. And Fox gets a lucky spray there with the Guardian. But they lose Taiga.
Oh my God!
No luck with that one.
Armageddon
Clean
too.
precision shooting. And it's a 2-on-3. Back of sight is Oni. Dealt with by Fussy Singer. Doesn't have the ability to trade this. Just needs to engage forward. As you have the salvo to buy time if you're Hayes. And Fudge says, I don't want to deal with neither Nart nor the initiation power of the Tejo. That's the wrong agents I want to fight with, and there was no chance for that defuse. I am falling back with my weapon in hand.
I mean, that could have worked out there for Fudge. I mean, if you had Fussy going ahead, placing the Armageddon, knowing that still players are going to be running out of the way, they were going to be flushing themselves off, and just kind of capitalizing that moment of chaos, we could have seen Kentucky win that one out, but understandably so, with the Tejo still alive, possibly, who knows how far back for that post plan, and the utility at hand to kind of flush that player and retort them so easily, especially even in a breach. A single, aftershock just shot right towards that spike. I mean, you're still in the same exact scenario where you haven't bought any time at all because you've traded off with a single press of a button. So good reads there. Great play from LA Tech, but even better yet, a great attempt from Kentucky considering what they started that round with. They didn't go ahead and overinvest anything. They shut down a lot of weapons. And even though they lost that round, still, they're the ones up because LA Tech won it, and still understand that we need to probably call a timeout after that because that wasn't the prettiest win that we could have had.
Time to maybe talk things through if you're LA Tech. We had put them, I think, fourth for tier 2 overall for the standings.
Yeah. I mean, I was a big proprietor of that, admittingly, purely because of how close they were against Georgia Tech.
Yeah,
I mean, that map was insanely close. And even then, this could go to a map 3, and they could have absolutely whomped when it came around to Haven. But we saw Kentucky pull up the first map. The comeback looked good there for a while, but it just wasn't enough.
Things have to change. It's a lot of weight on their shoulders. And our observer is showing us new buddies on the map. I didn't know about this either. Where is this on the map? Hold on. We'll check it out next time. There's an in-between round break as they'll scan through. Yeah, LA Tech, they had a lot of expectations on their shoulders. Same thing with UCF Knights Rising. I feel like they were a team coming to this one where they are very good. They're exceptionally powerful, but maybe not as much as they used to be. And that could be the case for LA Tech Blue, but we thought there was a really good shot because of how good they were against Georgia Tech. But Kentucky's given them a major run for their money. There was an interesting fight there towards B. Maybe not the right time to give up a player there if you're LA Tech, but you got a lot of value off of Oni finding that frag. So I would argue you actually have the advantage there because you removed Kentucky's Tejo and had to trade it out from the Clove on the other side. That is immediate value and a free plant with nothing to stall that for Kentucky's roster.
Drop in a smoke.
Time to look to see what's really next, considering in a 4v4 scenario, Showstopper coming up from LA Tech, nothing really happening up towards Heaven, even then still dancing, pushing up. This guy has been lining up, and guess what? He's going to continue to do so. Able to go ahead and knock down 3 players with the help of Elijah, pushing up towards that A site, just trying to hold down this spike. It is down to nothing but Taiga, and guess what? In a 1v4 scenario, you really can't blame the guy if he doesn't clutch it up. That's just a lot of players to ask to say, really, can we not knock anything more than just a singular player off?
I mean, just you trying to go for the showstopper. Obviously, no one's up there, but not even really having to let go of that trigger and the fire and shots off towards the 3 players that are all tunneling in through bottom of staircase. Talk about putting everything in the basket on that retake for one side. Only a single player going elsewhere. One could have gone rope, one could have gone through drop. That would have had 2 different angles to fight from. One could have gone staircase then. Could have had a player go through B site and take door.
Turn down.
I'm just not a big fan of seeing so much stacked to one side. As Oni once again deals with Fudge on the other end. In Kentucky, we saw the problem that arose without the salvos in the late stages of this round, and now you once again do not have them in your back pockets. Your fortune may have just been told, and it is not a solid one. You may have to go to the next year because your fortune for this one, it doesn't look so hot. As LA Tech have all 5, and they will send them towards the A main side, hoping to take this side again.
Yeah, just looking for something here. I mean, obviously, Kentucky not really having the best in terms of arsenals to work with right now, just kind of really trying to scratch it together. And even that talked about it. I mean, we were going to see eventually LA Tech go ahead and come back from this deficit. but it depends on how much. Do we see 2 rounds, and do we see a comeback? Do we see 2 rounds and another 2 comeback? Well, guess what? Here's a showstopper in hand. There's a kill from Magnetic. There's a lot of stuff to work with here, a lot of concerning factors that we can see Kentucky pull out of almost seemingly nowhere. But you got to have players on site to put it into effect. It is just nothing but fussy, trying to play the game, get characters, but guess what? The damage has been done. This makes it doable for Elijah to go ahead and pop that resurrection, but it's still not going to be enough. The calm is making guys back in towards that pitch. He's over towards stairs. The defense is going up. It's going to let you know, and the Bulldog still closes it. Formball with a 4K, making sure things are locked down and getting those double digits early.
I mean, you get stuck in this fight where you know it's a 1v1 on site. You know your clove's gonna die. They use the resurrection, but they'll just chase them down and buys time. You thought the refrag would be free. Elijah's entire choice of standing on that side of hut was that Oni would be able to get the frag afterwards if they died. They'd be traded. That was the plan. But not only does Oni not get the refrag afterwards, falls to the player pushing through defaults, but they also get chased down out of the resurrects. And leads into a 1v1 at the end because Narp was just being distracted by the player coming through A main. My goodness, Kentucky. You needed somebody to step up and play alive, and now you have it, and you got 4 ultimates on top, Dallas. That makes this so much more meticulous for them on this defense. Just waiting for LA Tech to make a mistake in information, make a mistake in positioning, and act on it. Because that Armageddon already is enough of a threat. Combo that with a Nightfall, combo that with a 5th player extra on top after they die of the Resurrect, and a Showstopper for a freebie 1 or 2 kills. LA Tech, they are going to have to whittle through some really annoying utility up front.
I'm really shocked we didn't see Kentucky just kind of go for an all up front when it came around to that A push already. I mean, just usually, keep in mind during the last map of split, I mean, we saw a couple situations where they were just pushing out. They were playing on the defense. They were looking to bring the fight to LA Tech, but we haven't seen something like that yet on this half. And honestly, there's any time to do it. Do it when you have 3-round differential. I mean, we've seen them win 1s, we've seen them be at 0, we've seen some great trades from them, but we haven't seen any curveballs yet, which, I mean, they haven't really needed it for this half. They've looked relatively sustainable. They've done a lot of good damage, finally get the showstopper off here, and it may find nothing at all, which is unfortunate, considering that there was other times. I mean, sure, hopeful thinking, but, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of different things they could do, and it just feels like they're just trying stuff. In this mid-round scenario, this is the worst time to kind of get it going and rolling.
10 seconds left.
Oh, no way.
No way.
Yeah, you're just denying Spike here. That's going to hit you completely. Oh.
That is
a
crazy, crazy round.
You see the Armageddon on site. There's no shot in hell. It's literally impossible to plant that.
I talked about how meticulous LA Tech was going to have to be. That meticulous nature cannot come at the cost of essentially buying or falling into the largest ploy that is time. Knowing that Kentucky are going to have the ultimate coming online. You killed Fudge like 4 rounds in a row as the first blood. They're going to have ultimate. They were already sitting at 18 and or 17 and 8 or 17 and 9 at that point. They were going to have ultimate. And Seaside's already difficult enough knowing that the Tejo and the KJ are in play. Man, oh man, LA Tech can be kicking themselves. That's now a 4-round difference back under control for Kentucky. And things look a whole lot less dicey for them. Just a couple of mistakes that if LA Tech believe these next few rounds not only send a map win for Kentucky, but a series win, and LA Tech falling into an 0-2 stat line through week 2. Oh. It's an eco round on top. Oh.
Yeah, this is not pretty. I mean, considering that, as I said, I mean, you're looking at 2-round deltas. You're looking to bounce back, kind of play exactly how you did during the first half. But I mean, LA Tech's attack has just not been nearly as aggressive, and nearly as concise as we want it to be. Just a little bit kind of all over the place. Understand that, I mean, they kind of tap off of a site a little too quickly. They like to go ahead and kind of change their shift of focus a little too fast. And honestly, you got to see a little more confidence out of them, especially in this case in the game, seeing how things have been going thus far. I'm curious to see if this actually kills. Okay, yeah, I would assume so if it does 150 damage to everybody. But Armageddon, just to equalize out, I mean, it could be worth it. Dancer's still alive, finding 2. Everybody else looking to get something done. Narp able to find 1. I mean, this could be doable. With that spike down, you just got to deny time. You got to play it out. But problem is, you don't have enough guys and spread enough comfortable positions to get the job done.
I mean, you gave up so much map control there for your Kentucky, right? They used the Armageddon to force you away from defender spawn. And look at the way that LA Tech played that. They immediately take that space. They immediately fight for the initial push up on Raptor side of defender spawn, where that little ramp is. They clear out that heaven side. They wrap all the way through to defender spawn. They clear out 2 players on that approach. Dansters, who slow at the start of map 1. We've said it a lot. We'll continue to say it. And bam, out of nowhere, now 20 and 14. Hayes is only going 10 and 12. The role has kind of been flipped on its head. The game plan has changed. The offense is firing through this one duelist as what a paint shell impact going off there towards the Rays of Fussy to the other end. And Elijah's phantom shots to connect to Kentucky's lone KJ. And it will be a C-sided plant with really no contesting besides Cornball, who has to go into the classic. It's
Oh God!
You can't miss that shot, Elijah!
No peeking.
Play down. He's gonna die here to this next player unless. Wait, now Phantom in hand. Okay.
Drone going out.
Look at the time he bought still, though. Those are weapons dropped, and while they aren't really collectible out of Kentucky, Dallas, they are still,
Here comes the
I guess, a threat because LA Tech are going to use Danster's ult here. I guess they'll charge up soon enough. They've been on fire, but wow,
Oh
you just
my
don't anticipate
God.
getting a kill from
I'm
there.
livid.
That's crazy.
All missiles away.
I really work top of the Rolling Thunder now. I mean,
Last player
considering those
standing.
in the 3v3, especially players dropping down more. Dancers just pressing W key, cleaning up house for 4K, and at least getting 2 of those ticks back from that showstopper. Good looks here from LA Tech. I knew it was going to be a 2-round delta. There's still a chance of that. Obviously, with Kentucky not having a bye during that last round and getting shut down by a Thrifty in the round prior, but I mean, there's a chance here. Just what do we save up? With the KJ lockdown, that's going to be influential during this round specifically, because I mean, you want to look at double digits. You want to say 13-11 by the end of this thing, at least to give yourself some kind of a recovery in terms of saying things aren't going to be too bad. But in the power rankings, when you say 13-11, 13-11, and you keep on seeing, 13-10, 13-11, if LA Tech is winning with those or losing with those 13-11s consistently, it puts them in a scenario of maybe these guys are just never closers and shows that they're not really as strong as what they could be.
Budge will hold top of mound. Assistance close by from your oh-so-talented Rays of Fussy. All those ultimates, I said, were in the back pocket of Kentucky for so long. Now no longer there. Just the Nightfall, and while this is fairly strong, has to have the right time, and Taiga has to be alive to do so. Like Taiga has had a little bit of bad luck in a lot of these straights on these pushes out of LA Tech. Rolling Thunder will isolate the player of Magnetic stuck on site. They're back of hut, but Taiga has a
good
perfect
pick there.
crossfire, and you've lost Elijah.
9.
Clove smokes are still valuable from beyond the grave, and Magnetic hears that plant going down, wants to test the
planted.
player on wall, and wins out their fight as Cornball does the same damn thing. It's a 2-on-5. LA Tech, yes, have spiked down, but a Nightfall can put Kentucky up to 12 and put that match in series point as Hayes is on the door and gets them both in the same fell swoop. 2 versus 2. Fussy knows that they're inside door. The Tendrils guarantee it. But the barrage, the salvo just does nothing but buy time. And the alarm bot does even more. Fussy through the bin, pushes through to One, gets there one and destroys the lockdown. Hayes around the corner, isolates Fussy, and Hayes just has to watch and wait. There's no way you can get this defused in time, and Cornball knows it. Hayes is back to doing Hayes things, and Kentucky just fall apart in this round.
Yeah, just too much going on there. I mean, even then more so, I'm surprised we didn't see Fussy make the push and make the play, just kill that guy over towards, I mean, because you know it's someone inside that secret. As you mentioned, you saw the tendrils, you saw the trail, and even they was looking around expecting maybe a player on box back towards spawn, but you're not worried about that. They're too far from the spike to make an impact in that round. Tejo, even at that range, he can't do anything. You got to push the problem towards him. I understand helping the team man out, but shutting down a player, making sure, especially if it's the likes of that Tejo, that's the one guy who can deny that spike purely by just existing on the field.
The ultimate is ready.
Both get stunned. Attempt there with the salvos to try to get some more damage off in the process.
Locating
Love
target.
seeing the Tejo use the special delivery a little bit more actively. It's supposed to be the go button for your team. And unfortunately, it doesn't really have the chance to recharge like the salvos do, but still can be fairly impactful early on. Fussy clears away the Roomba of death. No cleaning up here towards B site. This is where Kentucky want to kind of lie in wait. as LA Tech are trying to play into map control. Talk about the 3 zones of control in Valorant. It's attacking control, defender control in no man's land. And you're seeing LA Tech start to incise upon no man's land, sit in these apex positions and sentinel themselves up in these stalwart sides. Taiga, though, really far up with only a Marshall. And all of that utility that's set up by LA Tech is almost bad, it feels like. They kind of overextended so much that utility. The salvo now is going to be on cooldown, and they're not going to be able to have it for initial side plant for free. Elijah does win out in the early engagement to the player of Cornball up on site, but Oni just wraps around. This will be a tied 11-11 scoreline bar. A miracle out of Magnetic, who seemingly doesn't even want to test their luck just yet, as they'll crawl up through the upper side of B Heaven. Maybe wait for an exit frag or two of a players from LA Tech testing out some freebie space, and it's a 4th for Oni. Now, lockdown earlier didn't do much, but you're now almost able to get it back soon. Obviously, going up to 9 kind of stinks for KJ players, but I mean, that's an ult orb or 2, couple frags. Maybe you won't get it this next round, but you could very well get it the round after with the performance you've been bringing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a point now where, I mean, you're just kind of praying they go over towards C site, but even if they are, I mean, as a Tejo, you're backing up, you're playing that Armageddon. You know that, I mean, you have to guarantee yourself at least the overtime. You got to give yourself a chance. I mean, this is that point of desperation in the match where you look at how many ult points you have available. Well, Kentucky is a heck of a lot closer in a lot of regards to these ultimates, to these different setters, to these chaos creators. And while LA Tech has a singular resurrection, everything else is kind of a bit of a far cry right now. So, I mean, while there's shots, you can't let those shots hit your rogue right upside the head through a smoke and go ahead and set the difference initially, especially like I said earlier. The Armageddon's the one that you're guaranteed right now, but it's pushing up into spawn against seemingly 5 players.
LA Techer, once again, prowling that no man's land that is that B-Link. In Kentucky, a fairly contested ground forward for C. They take out Fussy here. Fudge is not too far away from this, and Fudge could actually be the first point of impact, first point of contact here. And if they lose the fight, down goes your Armageddon. We said that's like almost a guarantee for this round. It feels like it has to be
Unless you know
done.
you're not solo.
Yeah, there's the salvo.
You know they don't check.
You gotta take the shot there! But unfortunately, Fuzzy can't do it, and Fudge falls as well. Only a single kill. Take your shots! Not everyone can pull out a steal from back in CS's days. Patience isn't everything. Trigger discipline has to take a step back. As Oni gets the spike down and cements LA Tech for very possible match point already for map 2. I say already like it is quick. This is all possibly the longest amount of rounds we could ask for, as Kentucky have a 2 versus 4. We've seen it turn back the other way for LA Tech. Can Kentucky pull out their own little bit of magic? It's Magnetic. Deals with Dansters. Elijah up in the corner, up on box. Tapped and stunned. And even using the Resurrect, which not a necessity, not required of them. Maybe something they'll be unhappy with not having for this last round to try to make sure Kentucky cannot force overtime. 5 in a row, Dallas.
Yeah.
Goodness.
It's unreal. And considering that even then in that last round, that drone sent out by Fudge lets them know everything they need to know. No way Tejo's just going to go ahead and completely expose himself being on a drone for no reason. That's assisting somebody in some regard. Letting you know that even though while the first 2 players didn't check, which still baffles me, that somehow eventually LA Tech said, somebody's got to check this. Somebody's got to take this fight. And even then, look at Fudge.
No way.
Having the Armageddon hand, still taking these fights on mound. And seemingly it could be the last round. The most influential ultimate almost thrown away in a second encounter in the most important time.
The sheer fact of the matter is Fudge getting out of there now just, it's one of these things where I honestly pray they get killed there. Just to make sure that they don't do it again, right? Sometimes you have to let somebody get a little burned before they learn not to touch the stove, right? Like, you never do it again once it happens once.
To cover
You've done it 4 times
you're still
now.
not doing it.
You have to stop this. You have an ult in your back pocket, the most important one for your team, the only real one, besides a Resurrect, a selfish one. And it could be darn good for Kentucky, but that's asking too much of one player. As now LA Tech send themselves through tree, planting themselves up for a chance for a spike down on site and contention that will be nigh impossible for Kentucky to re-engage into. It's back in corner of Hut, not on wall. Fudge was too far away to send out the salvos, and that means that there will have the salvo available for the remnants of this retake. But you got a player all the way back on A main.
Go get him.
2 players spotted up on stairwell using the sensor drone.
Perfect sense.
Magnetic has 2 lined up, but can't choose
Oh,
target
you
discipline.
can't miss
LA
those.
Tech now have
Player
only Fudge and Cornball, and Fudge can only get their 1-for-1, and the Armageddon just doesn't do anything. Cornball, good for 2. Has to go more. Just time is running out, and there's just no way they'll be able to find enough impact quick enough. Because LA Tech know their win condition. They struggled with it on splits, but man, oh man, their map pick here for Lotus, it will be
Attackers
no
win.
problem in the closing few rounds. 6 in a row was required of them to keep Kentucky away from an overtime scenario. And when they're asked of it, they provide it, Dallas, and they sweep through the remainder of that half.
Too many times, too much we saw Kentucky where they had everything inside their pocket to get the job done. But I mean, it was just these scenarios over and over again. I'm surprised LA Tech doesn't see the ultimates at the top and understand that Tejo is the biggest threat inside these last couple rounds. They forced a C problem during the last round. That one completely dismantled the game plan because they didn't even have a chance to really retort in that fashion. Knowing they didn't double down and do it once more, saying that we just fought Tejo on Mound. He ran away, barely got away in that matter. And you don't say, he's probably still going to be here because worst case, he's just going to rotate offside a little bit and wait for that retake. And if we just press W all the way back towards spawn rather than just kind of playing it on the site and just completely nullifying that, it's just everywhere. It's one of those things where honestly, just investing the guy, putting him too far up is too big of a risk, knowing that, I mean, playing it safe and playing it calm, cool, and collected over the course of the game is what got you to that point in the first place. And I talked about bringing out that wild card during those double digits, finding yourself what could be seemingly that free round. And we just didn't see it come out because even mine still fuzzy later on. That showstopper I said that could be slammed right in towards that A spawn where you're finding maybe 2-3 players dead whenever you know the shots are raining out. And instead you go and use it during a C retake when you find no effect of it at all. It's one of those things where, I mean, it got to the point where Kentucky were almost baffled that they had found themselves that lead and didn't really know what to do with it, saying that if we just don't close this thing out, it's going to be chalked up because LA Tech, that's their map pick. And it gets to a point where they're saying, we need to prove that. And they did.
Now, one of the big differences, the key difference is agent selection obviously didn't vary very much.
No,
it
wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, and I don't feel like there was a difference, a big disparaging difference in terms of success out of the either agents that were different. But I think the big thing for Kentucky was how many times they attempted the B site in comparison to what we saw out of LA Tech. LA Tech knew A and C were really the only ones that they had. B, they treated it like no man's land. They treated it like a spot they would prowl into, that they would go for a frag or two. They never really had the intent for plans. They never used it as a spot to engage into. It was a frag spot. It was a spot where they can meet a 1v1, try to get the upper hand, and they did for the majority of the time in the middle stages of our second half. They treated it as such, and they come out with a much better scoreline in that second half because of it comparatively. You turn that around for Kentucky, and they wanted to plant there, 4 or 5 times, and they won once, twice, and most of those were desperate measures to get the spike down in hopes that something miracle would happen thereafter. There's no way that they can look at that if you are Kentucky and say, we respect what we did on this site. You have to engage elsewhere. If you had just completely vacated the idea of B-side like we saw come out from LA Tech, I genuinely think you would have already have won by this point because you would have been at least 2 rounds ahead, and those 2 rounds would have gotten you up to 13 in that second half. But that's all she wrote. Now it's up for map 3. We are in fact seeing Haven, another 3 objective map, and once again one where you don't really see B-site that often. It's an attacking prowling ground, a flanking point, and a quick rush when you know they're in an eco. We'll have to see how it pans out though. But before then, it's a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Right back with map 3. Let's see who closes this out. A map one that was a lot closer than maybe anticipated if you were an LA Tech side. They didn't get what they wanted, but still a fairly good game out of them. And then map two that was way closer than you anticipated, as you had to make a 6-round comeback to come out victorious. And we have a full best of 3 plaguing us, or maybe being happily brought to our shoulders here. Dallas in our second week of the SEL for this split, and it is a damn good one. It's Haven for our final. Can we see the LA Tech side continue the dominance they had for the final 6 rounds, or will Kentucky change things up just enough to lead themselves to victory as they round out our third map?
Right. I mean, this map right here is kind of the one convincing factor that's going to really say them in terms of the power rankings. I mean, because considering that, I mean, obviously, everybody in the big scheme of things, they look at the duelists, they see how many kills and how flashy and how good they look. And I was always a guy look at the controllers and see what they do. It's the same regard when it comes around to this. While even then, win or loss in terms of the series, it's going to hit them down a couple notches just to see that while we watched the rounds, we saw how things were. And even then, that last map didn't really feel like much of a win on LA Tech's side as it did as an absolute fumble for the side of Kentucky with the lead that they had surmounting after that first half concluding. So it's just a crazy predicament where, I mean, this is more of a statement point than anything else, so they can just prove us wrong and show us what they're made of.
Now, we do have confirmation, or we're hoping to have confirmation for a couple of games prior. We won't see the UTC scoreline, the University of Chattanooga scoreline against Texas State. That's been delayed till the 23rd, so 3 days from now on? But for Tier 2 Pool 2, the big game that we were looking for was Cumberland Phoenix versus Georgia Black. Obviously, you and I, we went over the standings prior. We had our talent rankings last week. A couple upsets from what we expected, and then we had our rankings, the overall SEO rankings. We kind of conjoined and brought our minds together and thought, well, we were fitting. Tier 1, we had Georgia Black as the number 1, and they just got rinsed by the Phoenix side of Cumberland. 2-map series, 13-6 on map 1, domination. Map 2 turns on over to Lotus like we just saw, and it was about as close as you can ask for. It went to overtime, of all things, but it only needed the 2 rounds, 14-12 against them. In Cumberland Phoenix, I think they've just solidified themselves as being probably the number 1 team here for the SEL. We'll have to see how the UTC game pans out.
Yeah, gotta just wait and see really how that just unravels. I mean, considering there's so much, but right back to where we are right now currently, already looking to see things and how they're going. No Tejo when it comes around to Haven, and understandably so. Kind of crazy, I know, but even then still, I mean, there's just too much that Sova offers when it comes around to this map. Knowing that drones will be covering things out, you need a lot more information with all these long hallways, and you have to have multiple means of understanding who's going to be at the end of those halls and what's going to be holding you up and delaying your slight push. So seeing what could be also the biggest differential we have seen, obviously, the Yoru versus the Rays. And even then, we saw Dansters, and both Dansters and Fuzzy, better yet, during that map number 1, not be all that great. Map number 2, Dansters finds a flow, gets kind of a little more of a work in there when it comes around to Lotus and finding a little more consistent kills, while Fuzzy still kind of really struggles to get back into that point. Well, this guy could be a jet player. I mean, duelists do have their comfort picks as well. And with them, it's a much, much more drastic difference than what you'll see with any other role. So this could be the point where finally UKY are like, sweet, we get our duelists in the game, especially starting things off on the attacking side. This map could just fly by.
Now, with the differences that Haven has in comparison to the other two, obviously operators would be a big part of it. You don't really see the boomstick being brought out often on the other 2 maps, but it's going to be something that's going to be heavily brought out by your Jets on Haven.
Down,
and Kentucky are kind of falling victim to the number 1 strategy in round 1. Sprint it down mid and get into engagement as fast as possible. LA Tech bring the action straight to their face, out through the garage doors, into the action, and well, everyone for the Kentucky side is dead bar Magnetic. And we have seen Magnetic do some absolutely crazy things, but having to rip through 200, around 200 HP in total from these 3 remaining players would be a very hard ask, especially knowing how much they have to aim in. But
1 enemy
reflections there with the classic. They get both Narp and Oni now, and it's just a single 1v1. The Clove, though, with the Decay Orb, dropping their HP to nearly 0. Elijah does not act off of that, though, seemingly really hesitating on that choice. Look at the pistols just laid around, fettered on the floor here inside Hay, as Magnetics does not trust really to pick up the spike just yet. Left. Now taking the approach forward. Elijah's panicking, and though they do get it, Man, oh man, imagine if Magnetic had, but Kentucky will have to imagine it for a little longer, as that first round win will still fall to the defense who rushed forward into their face of LA Tech.
I'm surprised they didn't rush once again, and seeing when we saw Magnetic go ahead and kind of pop up. You know that you're looking at a pistol fight. You know the guy's going to have to reload eventually, and at that point, you just overwhelm the numbers with the 2v1 kind of scenario, but it's just not the real luxury handed over right there. But still starting things off, LA Tech. This is the first pistol round they have won at the start of the map, rather than being a second half. So, I mean, good looks for them. The second pistol round they've won through the entirety of this series, so give themselves an early start. I like to see kind of how they start off for round number 2. We've seen some pretty forced out buys from Kentucky again and again and again. That seeing a little more patient play coming through from LA Tech, kind of setting up these snipers, these outlaws, these guardians, a couple specters. Just leaning more towards the patient side. I kind of like the difference, but I want to see really what that does in round number 3 if they still find success in this one.
Oni back of sight. Seeing the opposite side of Radiant Ice Stack has a couple of assisting players nearby. One now stepping directly into the objective. That's your Clove. Dancers will just use this outlaw to hopefully good success. Just watching this mid window, the garage window door frame that connects to Link. And Kentucky, despite having arguably good stance to maybe engage in towards C, are still waiting, calming things out. They'll use one Omen smoke, maybe hoping that LA Tech will try to move in. But we've said how much mid control is heavily dominated by attacking teams. Their Sentinels rotating through there to get to the back of A side or even through C. These first 2 rounds, Magnetic has been on the prowl, cutting through that no man's land,
30
taking
seconds
control of
left.
sites and directions that are nowhere near where LA Tech are playing, and they've done it here once again for round 2. No success in round 1, but this is a free plant on the A site, which will set up a post plant that arguably LA Tech will have more trouble with, having to close the gap against these pistols where they'll have just as much of an odd as getting a good share of shot as they would as getting shot. Narp though. Spectre out to Fussy. Magnetic's close corner here. With this breach stun, maybe Magnetic could act off of it, but they hesitate. And the smoke will dissipate at the same fell swoop, leaving Magnetic now to pray no one checks
They're not
this
gonna
corner.
check it.
Trigger
There's so much
discipline,
utility
getting their
flushed
one.
out.
Rushed in. They were full flash. Nothing they can do, and they just can't hit the shot to Dansters, leading it into an easy frag setup for the rest of LA Tech's entire team to engage into it. Man, oh man, what could have been, what should have been, it won't matter. LA Tech can go up 2-0, and they keep majority, if not all of the weapons they really wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, outstanding effort there, but even better yet, I mean, the positioning there, Magnetic could have done so much more in that round. I mean, seeing the setup, I love the looks of what we got from Fudge, able to go ahead and kind of shoot out the stun, nobody swung off of it. Doing the aftershock, nobody swung off of it. Just playing it patient, and we saw it right there, where that complacency set in for Kentucky, saying that clearly nobody's in that corner, they're not going to defend it that much, or they would have swung by now, and even then completely neglecting it. But not only after the first death or kill was made, because clearly all kinds of comms are going on inside that call, letting people know what's happening and trying to go ahead and actually worry about the side at hand, that players just weren't thinking about that cubby. And unfortunately, even then, Magnetic just couldn't land those shots and didn't even take it in the first place to try to close out more.
Fussy will be the first one out the gate when it comes to lower side ramp. It's a good spot of them, but nothing really to do because Fussy's completely blinded by that paranoia. Fudge gets a nice frag, but short-lived success, and they'll have to watch the rest of the team into the afterlife. Dancers missing the second shot with the outlaw, hiding within their cloudburst, hoping that they don't get spotted by Cornball, who rips through 2, giving the win to Kentucky, but 3 rifles are costed out of their hands, which means LA Tech, who didn't have to buy up really anything at the end of round 2, mean they have full rifles, they have full kit, and they even have an ultimate out of the Hunter's Fury ready to rip out against this Kentucky roster's push forward on the offense. And they only have a Neuro Theft to counter this, as Magnetic has been pretty keen on finding good frags, getting that map control. Arguably the ult orbs, as I would have to assume, is how they get the majority of those pips, those 2 pips early in round 1 and 2. And pray that maybe the information will be enough, because that was obviously lacking for, I think, both teams, it feels like, on our last map of Lotus.
Yeah, I mean, just really insane considering, I mean, that last round, I mean, that was so doable. I didn't even expect them to find as many kills as they did. Knowing that even in the Marshall on site, getting those shots off, finding enough damage, even then assisting with the rest of the team, knowing that even then still, I mean, and the right click afterwards, still expecting maybe to find some kind of effect off the back of that, but just nothing really lined up there. But what is lining up so far? Well, some kills for some particular players. Guess who's back to really feeling himself? Hayes, able to go ahead and already get a Hunter's Fury to work with, but on the opposite end of the end, we got the same exact thing coming through. Hudge now with one of their own, looking to just go ahead, play the pressure. And these Hunter Furies, though, they're not going to be like these Armageddons. These usually have a tendency to be sat on for a really long time when Sovas finally be like, okay, this thing's relatively usable. And thankfully, I'm being proven wrong by Hayes. He's already got not one, but 2 kills off the back of it.
So much just contention there inside of B main. Taiga wants to play through, stuck inside of Rabbit. What in the world is happening? Still strips away 2 rifles from the hands of LA Tech. But the damage has been done. That's 3 round wins now for their defense. And offensively, Kentucky just haven't found their feet underneath them. I don't know what exactly has gone wrong every single time, but it just feels like the rest of the team is not really meshing as well with the intent out of Magnetic, which means that Sentinel doesn't find impact in the same time that's needed for this front 4 to fight elsewhere. A rush through to the B site maybe could have been a vision for them, but when you get stalled so easily by a Hunter's Fury, maybe you treat that round as just a way to bite the bullet, the proverbial bullet, and quite physically when it came to the result at the end of it. Let them use that ultimate and then play for the next. I don't know what's in the mind of Kentucky, but what has to be in the mind is getting a free first blood here and damage to the player in back of sight. Would have been clean if it was a sniper, but you only got a sheriff. It's an eco round at Kentucky.
Yeah, just a little bit awkward, but still LA Tech coming out on top. I mean, this is going to be around where, keep in mind, Kentucky, they haven't been hard hitters. Obviously, there's been a lot of seasons of the SEL so far, at least in terms of Valorant, a couple. But Kentucky hasn't really been high up on that list when it came around to the earlier stages. LA Tech has consistently made it into playoffs. And keep in mind, Haven is one of those maps, just like Ascent, that has constantly been inside the rotation. So this is one of those maps where you can tell that historically they should know what they're doing. While this isn't the same roster, knowing that they were more than likely on a B team, or even then had some kind of connection to those previous guys, they have an expectation, they have a standard to meet. And they know that they're, no matter what, whether they win extremely fast, win extremely slow, they want to make sure they have a difference, a better number overall. They want to pay their tributes to the guys that have come before them, knowing that this map should be solid.
It's almost legacy, right, Dallas? Like the experience, the map knowledge, the gameplay is legacied out of this roster. And that has to be required of you with how much history is there for LA Tech. Elijah and Hayes, though, refragging off of Oni's death. Danster even engaging far forward, dealing with Cornball down in hell. Taiga just really no shot, only having that sheriff to work with. It's an easy, clean round for LA Tech's defense to retake sites. The value you gain out of that if you're Kentucky is just maybe dropping one weapon, getting some ult orbs, finding value on the economy, not having to do too much for it, and getting that spike down for some extra credits, which I guess is just icing on the cake. But these ultimates are where I think ultimately, pun intended, I guess, most of the value is going to have to be found for these next 2 to 3 rounds. So many times you see ults held onto in the collegiate scene, and it feels like the closer we step into tier 1, the less likely they are to hold on to them, the more likely they are to just immediately expunge that ult into space. Maybe we see that out of LA Tech. They want to fight out of Garage here once again, get that early information, the early peak. Both players extending to Hay.
Yep.
And the speed from Kentucky, they want C-Douse. They want to go out.
I don't blame them. They barely going ahead and going by the set ammo swarm. Able to go ahead and find themselves some good trades on site, but coming out on top at the end of it, knowing they get the near ult afterwards. They're trying to scan, see who the rest of these players are, and they have found exactly what they want. LA Tech not really having the hottest start right here. And Kentucky getting that spike down, knowing that Sova should be running his tail right back to the end of C, down that hallway, just playing off the back of that Hunter's Fury. I'm surprised Kentucky isn't trying to go ahead and set up for this, but knowing that on site there's going to be more players stationed, trying to deny that, try to just play the nuisance game, you really can't blame them.
Magnetic will be spotted by the Owl drone. He's leaving send a recon bolt over towards Platt. It's cleared away. They now know Cornball is there. Cornball will fall closer towards side. Seeing on Radiant stack. There's your frag. Rasking forward. Magnetic hiding within the smoke ensures that Elijah cannot stay there for too much longer. Second round for Kentucky. They give up 2 in a row, a lot like they did in the first 2 to get their 3rd round win. And they'll do so again, but this is not a sequence of events that you can allow to continue that direction. That would mean at halftime, you're at half the total tally of what LA Tech are bringing to the table, and it's asking a whole lot out of your defense when you're talking about a C site that's very difficult to retake, considering the agents that we have for LA Tech's offense, knowing how strong Fussy is over on the defensive side, which, I mean, we saw how weak they were on offense when it came to Lotus. That shouldn't have been the case, but it was. I think it's going to be the exact same thing here on Haven. Just getting them under control, letting them start to feel themselves, letting them start to heat up in mindset and in physicality to elevate their play style to give Kentucky enough to win out a couple rounds and close out the second half.
Yeah, gonna be interesting to see what LA Tech does for this one. I mean, considering that the guns are there in their hands, they done have a little bit of an emphasis in terms of where these guys are going to go and have an idea of how they're going to go and create this stall, but we haven't seen too much of an actual rotation queue just besides just a lowly Danster coming over from that C site, leaving that alone, leaving it purely up to the KJ because unfortunately Oni has not gotten a kill in this game so far. 6 rounds in, donuts across the board for the guy, but I mean, he's not there. He's going ahead playing the information game, stay around that, and then here you go. Sniff out the Cypher that's sneaking up. Lock this guy up, possibly win that 1v1. No matter what it is, just don't give space to Kentucky right now because they're spread out. While they do want to hit that A site, they want to see what else can become available until the Rolling Thunder comes through and really sets the tone of this is what we're doing.
Yeah, you really hope you can get a frag or two, though, these players that have been forced out of sight with the effect of the Rolling Thunder. Now you've got full fire for LA Tech. You have a lagging player of Magnetic who just doesn't get the impact you're hoping for. That's what I'm talking about, the prowling player in through B. Not to harp out a player who's in the Twitch chat, but Poison was always the person I looked towards to do so for Auburn on their Valorant side, and they were the team that brought it out first here for the SEO previously. It just doesn't work out, and this is what a lot of what Kentucky are trying to rely on for their team. Magnetic's presence. The flashes have to go forward. Jumping shot out of the open. Kentucky get the better end thanks to Fudge, who rips away 3, but Fudge falls, leaving Elijah in a desperate 1v2. Low HP, the player down through long. Elijah knows there has to be one close, but just isn't being given the visual. Operator now collected, wants to fall away from this site and just can't do so. As Cornball finds the frag on top, will die to the spike detonation, but problems aren't there if you get a round win, and you can continue to do so to demoralize the credit pool of LA Tech, because look, they're gonna be stuck in an eco heading into this 8th round.
Yeah, just unfortunate there from once again. I mean, LA Tech not really the best hold coming out from them. I mean, the operator has to find that early success, and even if it for a retake, you got to know when to swap. You got to know that, I mean, it's just not going to really work out for you. And Dancers has not been that guy to really make the just entire possibility of an operator look hot just yet. I mean, the guy's been gunning when it comes around to having the rifles in hand. So it leaves the question, why are you making the swap? Why are you investing all this money for a possibility, for a chance? And I mean, this is not a game of gambling. This is a game of skill. You got to make sure to know that if you're firing on something, don't change it up just yet. Wait until it stops working. And LA Tech, I mean, we see them still in the lead. They found themselves, what, 3-4 rounds in a row, it almost felt like, with how dominant they were. That it doesn't really warrant investing that much money to put yourself behind in some regard. The timing on this.
He's going to have to fight into this. They know it's there. There really isn't any way to get past this without actually shooting it. I think what you do here is since you know they're not going to extend towards the A site because you have control there, stack the majority of the players off towards C and try to tempt them to force to rotate back. Fussy goes up and over, tries to deal with Oni, but Fudge gets the better end of not just Oni, but Elijah as well. My goodness. Fudge has been proving themselves to be a powerhouse. We saw it on map 1, a little silent on map 2. Not great gameplay on map 2, but map 3 coming out alive once again as Fussy gets that frag towards the player towards defender spawn of Narp. And it's only Hayes who uses the Hunter's Fury with hopes of what they had 4 rounds prior, getting the 2 for. The team's not alive. The information just isn't there. And it is a Kentucky decisive round win. 4 players left standing, and the C-side just was no problem whatsoever for them here.
Yeah, I mean, just really completely mitigating all the strengths that we've seen so far to LA Tech to kick off this map. Things slowing down, answering things consistently. I mean, once again, you got to look back to Oni. I mean, now only getting 1 kill in the meantime. And I'm not going to put too much stress on this guy over the course of this game. I mean, that's unfair to him. But I mean, even then still, the rest of the team not looking nearly as tight-knit in terms of those kills. I mean, you can't ask Hayes to slow down. That's stupid. You can't ask somebody else just to step up. That's also a ridiculous request. You just got to see what your placements are looking like, whether you're setting your team up for these kinds of encounters to look better, to spread the kill differential, to get in a team scenario where even if kills are being made, assists are behind it, because you're also lacking in that department. But finally, with a bit of an awkward encounter right up towards C main, trying to see whether you can get an interaction with these guys, find some kills. We do see some trades, but it's still Kentucky coming out on top because they didn't have any problems to press. They're waiting for things to come in their direction. And LA Tech is handing it to them on a silver platter.
Spike planted.
Lots of noise being made, and it distracts enough, and it always frees up everything, it feels like, for Kentucky. It's a side plant. A shock dart, actually. Managing to find a nice frag. It's very rare to see that, but Tiger's already low. Stuck in a spot they really felt like they couldn't remove themselves from. It evens the odds to a 3-on-3. Most retakeable objective in all of Valorant, they say. It's me that says that. It's very common saying, though. Surely, I promise, guys. Today, lockdown just makes that even easier, but you have to get kills, and Hayes just not get the better end of their initial frag they were hoping for. Oni spotted away from player lower on ramp side. Elijah sticking his defuse. Fussy doesn't have an angle, and there's just no way to step there in time because the lockdown was perfectly played in. And there's no, I guess, gamble to try to shoot that through wall to clear away the lockdown. They just trust that they can fall back for it, and their plant wasn't where they needed it to be for lower short. It should have been placed for upper long control and post plant. That's enough. That's a changeable enough, I think, from LA Tech. It's a rightful win for that lockdown. Kentucky are going to have to read into that the next time they play this map. They're not going to see it until the end of the next half. There's no way that 9 ult pips get charged up between then and then.
Anything's possible.
Nine.
I mean, with Oni, I mean,
Swarm grenade.
he did find 2 off the end of that
Oh, it
round.
was crazy last map.
Oni also,
Now-
during map number 1, had an ace. Like, I mean, there's potential there. All these guys can light up, but it just don't feel consistent. I mean, that's unfortunate. That's when you're going higher up into the semi-pros and into the pros. That's primarily what they look for. Where you can do great during a map, but they can't look at your
Spike
resume.
planted.
Whenever it's in an API, it's a little bit more open. You can't lie. You can't call your buddy and say, "Hey, can you act like my manager and sounded really good?" They're gonna look at your report. So I mean, you just gotta make sure that you're on it.
Now, Bridge Utility just continue to stall out towards Garage. Good counterance from Kentucky, but the frags just aren't
One
there.
enemy
Instead, it's
remaining.
Danster and Narp who are lighting up the execution to the C site. These cloudbursts
spray
can
it.
just
Yeah.
slow things down. Tyga has no
Not a
chance.
defuse.
Shock dart out, trying to, or sorry, Recon dart out to try to get a little bit of information on top. But Narp, I don't know if there's any player want to talk out for consistency. They were slow on map 1, but they ended it in a reasonable department. Same thing with map 2. But when they light up, when you see them get a kill, it's almost immediately they get a second or third afterwards. It's very rare you see them get a single kill in a round. And that's a big one for them. Almost single-handedly, utility alone screams LA Tech into the C site and just ruins the chances for Kentucky to find picks.
Yeah, they're just not really having too much of an opportunity, but they found themselves enough in terms of this half so far to get to this current standing. And knowing that even in Kentucky, good looks for them, especially in a round like this, already going ahead, looking to see what they can manage, and even in the late alarm bot, I like that. Racing. Going ahead and letting you know that, I mean, this is more than likely going to be a C hit now. I think you call for a rotation at least from your Jet. You have one player over this side, but obviously don't go for a full investment. You can already look at that minimap. They are swarming. They are allocating from everywhere, hoping to have 4 players to hold it down. And if they shift over to B, you can at least pinch that in. As it stands right now, yeah, looks a little bit one-sided. Immediately, you can tell. There's the stop. Fudge holding up, saying, wait, may not be there. I may have to turn around. And the looks of what we got, yeah, that's exactly where you're going.
It's good, though, from Kentucky to kind of distract and lead them to the C site. They read very well into the timing. See the live pips going forward as well. They want to try to see where they want to send the paranoia out or try to engage with utility. There's the gap being closed with the tailwind up in heaven. LA Tech don't have a player that's getting caught out for it, which is the right idea. Just make sure you don't die. And on top of that, just send a double shock dart up and over the top. I don't know why you're planting in this spot. I guess it's defendable from down and lower long, but you don't want to hold it there. Plant it in default. You're just getting into the space of LA Tech's defendable area. Cornball. Now the only one left has found a single kill, but Spike's not down, and your position down here along is a guarantee. Bulldog. 4 frags,
10
10 seconds. This would be the craziest clip in the history of Valorant. But Cornball, I don't know. I think maybe they just hesitate here. And that hesitation in the information you give by sending out that smoke, that dark cover, just lets Hayes fire straight through. And Hayes,
Last round before the switch.
amazing. Map 1. Map 2 was not as strong as a Danster was for a long period of time there. But map 3, once again, just leading as an initiator. This is where they're thriving.
I mean, it's every initiator's kind of home ground, though. I mean, this is the closest you're going to get to an old school map in terms of Valorant. You're going right back to the compositions. We're not seeing any crazy new agents at all. The only one that you could really classify would be Elijah on that Clove, which I mean is fresh enough for the team to know that there's some different capabilities out of it, because the Omen, sure, while great, the ultimate not nearly as useful. It's not a tone setter. It doesn't create anything too many times, more than not. So I mean, looking at it, it's enough of an adjustment, but it still feels so darn familiar to them, and they're making it work. They're utilizing the power creep for these agent pools, and at the same time, they're showing what they're made of. Able to find some good trades, going 1-for-1 right there towards Garage, holding it down. Oni coming back, running through and saying, look, I may have been slow, but it's towards the end of the half. It's the last round. I got to speed it the heck up. And, well, in a 1v2, you had the chance. Just fell a little bit short.
Man, Fussy, even despite being spotted and tagged by the Owl drone,
Switching
couldn't
sides.
give a flip about the players pressing towards them, and Cornball providing just the right amount of assistance for it. You'll see it in the replay. Hayes, early engagement there with the Hunter's Fury, not as effective we saw down in round 4 or 5. Oni, who really takes this round into their own fell swoop, but the team beside Oni needs to get these kills, needs to act off of this. And the fact that Dansters can't collect themselves enough to get that frag, I can excuse Elijah, but everything thereafter just needs to be fixed. Small errors in positioning and crosshair placement and judgment can change an entire game. Just look at the way that Kentucky had to reevaluate the end of map 2, giving up 6 in a row. They got one more round in the first half. It would have been an overtime game and very well could have ended in their favor. 2, they had never hit B. Small mistakes in judgment. Could have been an entirely different game, and they never would have needed to get close with LA Tech in that second half. Kentucky only 2 behind entering the second. And defensively, I think they're in a fairly good spot, as they will also get first blood and make it a second on top, as it is bad for LA Tech if they can't see anything off the back of some paranoias, and they're already losing out in some really dicey gunfights that should have probably gone in Elijah's favor. Thankfully, Oni is there with a ghost to clean up just a little bit longer, and they'll play for a post plant here for Kentucky, as both players will be inside
Spike
garage.
planted.
What can Fussy do alongside their Sova? Not too sure what you're going to rely on here, because there's no real utility.
Right.
Sheriff has to kind of hit that long shot. There's the recon bolt. It's recharged up. Just going to leave and let it kind of send its sonars out. One player back of sight, one towards plat. Fussy should know that. Fussy needs to go in off the timing. Oh, what a shot! Their third good one in the round. And LA Tech somehow pull off what, as you'll see here in this replay, is the most ridiculous start to a pistol round you could possibly ask for. Should have been Kentucky's, but Kentucky can't close it.
Yeah, just the unfortunate reality of what happened. I mean, even didn't see it then. Coming down to what happens there, obviously you see that the Omen stays alive and it ends up getting closed out, but even then still, as I talk about the refreshing attribute of getting a new agent into the game, at least in the smallest regard. Keep in mind, that push takes a little bit longer. Kentucky knows the clock is ticking. They have to push that, not only because of the spike, but a couple more seconds, close smoke comes up. This guy's dead, but still playing the game. It's those kinds of small elements during those rounds where you feel like, I mean, obviously in a pistol round, it's the one round where you say it doesn't mean much, but yet still simultaneously means everything in terms of setting the tempo of the rest of the map. So just small stuff like that is enough, considering that, well, Kentucky had 0 utility going into that fight.
Narp will be the player who holds onto the spike here for the side of LA Tech's offense. Gets it further back towards main. The breach is very important, it feels like, for so much of Haven's offense. It used to be the end-all be-all to shut down KJ's. The lockdown, be able to send it in from B link to A and clear it in bottom sewer, but obviously no longer does enough damage for that. You still like the flashes, you still like the possibility of safely driving your team forward into space, especially when the only other initiator you have is a Sova that's really just there for information and shock darts. Danster, Hayes, they each get one. Danster actually finds a second there towards the end, just the final bullet out of their Spectre towards Fudge. And LA Tech's offense is doing what you'd expect for a second round after a pistol round win. Just holding W together. What's the term you used for it, Dallas? It's I'm totally blanking on this. You used it twice today. I love it. Collectively, as a collective, holding W and taking control of that side.
I was like, it's the fact you repeated it after me 2 times. I was expecting you to run in.
One enemy remaining.
It's also the word technically used for airplane simulators.
All right,
They have a
lucky
collective.
socks. Don't fail me now.
I'm a big sim guy, so
All right. Well, now that we just lost half our audience, how are the rest of y'all doing?
Because not all of us are clinically talented at Valorant, okay? Gotta find different genres.
No, but even then, as we're talking about the recollection of a word, that was an outstanding execution by LA Tech. I mean, obviously it was a bit slow of an execution, but even still, I mean, no matter what, the big trendsetter, I mean, obviously, still look at it. Fussy at the bottom, Danster now just surviving, floating. I mean, you don't have to sink or swim here. I mean, dude was just kind of big chilling, at least towards the middle on the defensive side, and that's all you're really asking for. Attack this where you need to step up, and he has already done just that. And that's the problem. It wasn't just on the last map, or on this map in particular. He was able to do it during the last map as well, being the standout duelist. While it wasn't by a massive margin, per se, it was saying, this is a guy who's waking up, and that's the most important thing.
This is the type of round you'd like to hit the B side fast, and LA Tech do so very successfully. So I think Kentucky never really perused, and even when they did, it was shut down emphatically by the LA Tech defense. As their retake here, it's not looking so good. LA Tech has full control of the side. Dancers from up above, Narproc ready to swing thereafter.
Yeah, this is so annoying.
About as perfect as you could ask for. Magnetic over on the A side, the only one to find success out of Kentucky, and it's an isolated 1v1, and Magnetic has been really good about those the entirety of this series, but the rest of the team, when Magnetic is not there, struggle. That's a problem. They're the glue that's holding this team together, and when they're not available on the initial retake to the site, you can't let it just fall apart instantly, as the whole team just funnels into the exact same doorway where there's 3 separate angles, varied from height and elevation and angles, that LA Tech are using to shut that down. It's double digits, double the stat line of Kentucky, and no weapons for Kentucky either.
Yeah, and even, I mean, just the way they've been playing this offense, the way they've just been creating so many issues for these guys, it's so smooth. I mean, you look at that last round cloud burst, you just need Dancers to stay alive. Then Recon Dart comes out, that creates another problem. Even then, you still got like there, just everybody, Taiga there to assist and create a bit of a problem. Fudge backing up as well. Everybody's doing something in this regard. Just protect a singular player, but they're not just backing it with utility. They get the utility, they follow up, and they say, look, this is a numbers advantage that we can just use. While we only got maybe 2 seconds to do it, it's more than enough time to take that shot, and they do exactly that. And already having the numbers advantage, you're going to play for these trades. I mean, you don't have the best weaponry coming into it. You can't really do too much. And even then, Oni, who's only on 15 health, still finds another. So much here that Kentucky has to go through. And, man, I just don't know if they have enough firepower to even break through a part of it.
And speed, I think, is another big thing. It's hard to notice how slow Kentucky were on these executions. A large part of that's probably likely due to the struggle that Taiga and Fussy were having in that first half, and likely will continue to do if LA Tech continue to bring down the hurt and the dominance that they are throughout these first 4 rounds, breaking that standard mold of the 2-1 splits. But not having your duelists be able to go majorly heavy in the kill department, trust them to lead into the front and get a frag to kind of open up space on site, or to draw sight lines at least, at the very least, for them, or even just having a shock dart or recon bolt to gather enough information. Kentucky were slow when they were pushing these sites. Every time they hit A, LA Tech, all 5 would get out of sight. There'd be no one getting dusted in that regard. That just cannot be allowed. Look at the way LA Tech are executing. This is now 3 rounds in a row where their speed has single-handedly, decisively won them the majority of the start, if not the entirety of it right off the rip. 3 kills on a swing through C main, not even into long yet, just in the lobby side of C.
My ult's ready.
Kentucky just have no answers for the pacing that LA Tech are bringing.
Yeah, just unfortunate. I mean, we're seeing LA Tech just breathe right through these sites, just like it's nothing. Wind underneath their wings, just flying onto these sites, and even then still they're not having to explore very much. I mean, look at this. The lockdown's still available, Rolling Thunder. They're not even using too much. Cornball able to go ahead and make things look very doable with the 1v2, but look at the denial. I mean, just see how they're playing this. There's being a nuisance. They got all the time in the world to play around with this. Haze wrapping around, not even being checked. It's just too much here as LA Tech hit themselves a massive differential of 7 rounds. Biggest we've seen all night, and better yet, sustained and could be capitalized and closed out on.
I mean, we saw a crazy spear of rounds at the end of map 2 from LA Tech to close out the map and lead us into map 3 on Haven, and it was 6 in a row. They're very likely here to do the exact same thing. It's not a full buy out of Kentucky. They have to have regen armor, Guardians for 3, a Bulldog out of Magnetic, Fudge the only one with a rifle, but they're taking that at the cost of real rifle, a Vandal, at the cost of only having soft armor. I don't know, just Kentucky, they feel lost for the second half. And that has to change because it's either you lose this round and it's done, or you make a huge comeback on the mental and on the physical. As you'll see a fallback plan made by Kentucky for the early engagement for the ult warp off towards A-Long. They want that from the shadows, and to make sure they can quickly pivot over to a site to defend, as well as have the possibility to just kind of distract and slow down LA Tech. Because like I said, the speed seemingly is the problem, so you need the utility in the stall to try to, I guess, resolve yourself to defend it actively and not sacrifice players.
I mean, they're just playing this slow because they know they got a lot of ultimates. And so long as you get that spike down, keeping guys alive, I mean, you throw your clothing, you're dead at the problem. So long as Dancer just goes crazy here for a little bit, I mean, there you go. See, line it up, get the plant down, and you're going to see Kentucky just try to create a bit of a denial, because if they don't leave this out, there you go. Things are going to be a problem. Spike can get one. Spike goes down. Rolling Thunder and Hunter's Fury is still available here.
How much stall can LA Tech possibly provide here for this post plant? Narpnarts in Garage. This would be easily cleared if you just sent players there for Kentucky, but they're vacating Rolling Thunder to keep them off of this
simultaneously is crazy.
Hunter's Fury. This just seems like too much engaged all at once. And we'll have to see if Kentucky can act off of the mistakes from LA Tech. Tyga's going for the defuse.
Dude.
One player remaining. No chance to swing it in Kentucky. Stay involved in this round, and it very well could have and maybe should have been LA Tech's victory, but they just sent out everything they had all at once for no darn reason. A timeout is called despite there being 6 rounds between them. LA Tech want to talk things through.
Their first thing they're saying is, what the hell was that? I am literally, I'm giving y'all, we not only do we have God mode in terms of vision, but we can hear inside the calls too. That is what they said. I guarantee it. It is just a point where you either hear the tap, then pop it, and then you know that there's at least going to be one player around that spike, and you more likely know that the Rolling Thunder rolling in from the right is going to knock the player out to the left. That's one guaranteed kill. You know that much at least, but there wasn't even comms between those two. Hayes and Narp, even in-game, talking to each other like agent to agent, like, bro, what was that? Like, what was happening there? No synergy. No communication. We just both think this is the time for me to shine. Y'all can both shine. The entire team can shine if you have yourself a 7th round differential to close things out. This is the map I was talking about making a statement. And while they've done that so far, I'm not going to berate them too much for that mistake because there's still a 6-round difference. They've earned this luxury. But we've seen them come back from another team having that same luxury. Kentucky blundering 6 rounds straight during the last map. We could see that same thing here. And while sure we go into overtime instead of closing the game out, still, the statement is lost.
This is where UK White will try to channel their primary roster successes they've had. Maybe try to, I don't know, just try to bring up something, because obviously 6 rounds in a row seems difficult. It's not a good day if you're Kentucky. They lost also against Charlotte today for their main roster, UK White Blue. And they don't want to have the same thing go. This would be a bad day for the state of Kentucky to have both of your rosters lose out. Fudge, though. 3 kills in the same round is a damn good way to get the ball rolling. The Russian from LA Tech. You anticipate a B site to be typically vacated and not something primarily assessed by attacking teams? We kind of dogged on Kentucky for doing it too much on Lotus. LA Tech ignored it. Now it's turned into the opposite. Kentucky only went once to B site in the first half. Otherwise, where it's a C and an A objective mentality, LA Tech have now gone for it twice within the span of 4. They do not seemingly have as much success as they could have or they did in round 3 of the second half. It is a total Kentucky lopsided affair, with the only kills now coming out of Narp, who, yeah, squeaks out too, but that will be it as the 7th falls for Kentucky.
There it is. This could be the beginning of the end of the dream here for LA Tech. I mean, obviously, things are going to swap up and slow down, and reality will finally be a big slap in the face once they hit an OT, but I mean, the possibility of that is a little bit sketchy. I mean, you got to look and see what's happening here, where these guys are going to go, what kind of transfers are being made. I mean, Dancer's obviously not too worried about an eco round if it gets down to it, having the Blade Storm to play with. But I mean, even then, it feels like the art of a good Blade Storm and a good Jet has been lost to time, because of the amount of, meta shifts we've been through, Jet players shifting over into Raze, knowing that she's a little more viable in these smaller maps, then going over even here on Haven. We've seen Neon being played with the buffs that she had there for a little while, where the art of a good Jet has been, well, as I said, buried within the patch notes. And it's a whole thing where you got to see whether or not you can have that moment again. And if there's anybody you're hoping for it to occur for, it's no one other than Fussy. As I said, it's been not only relatively silent on a couple of these maps for what compared to what your role's supposed to be and what kind of highlight you're supposed to have. I'm usually the one grabbing Scott by the collar, dragging him back from screaming out duelist names over and over again. But today it feels like we haven't really had to have that issue too much because, well, the spotlight hasn't really shown on them too much.
Slight burn against me aside. That's true.
It's any play-by-play, though.
It's the role that fits into, unfortunately. Man, it plagues the position. Duelists just haven't had a great day today. It's been initiators after initiators. You'd like to see if it was controllers. And there are some maps where controllers do really highlight themselves. I felt like Ascent was that for a good portion, for a good time. Fracture feels pretty controller heavy for a lot of teams with Brims.
Icebox.
Icebox, huge one. Seaside, though, is the push now for LA Tech Blue, and they will get the spike down. And Kentucky have to retake this. They only have one ultimate, the Blade Storm. Unlikely to be utilized here. The rifle will likely just be a better weapon for them. Fudge will try to engage the player likely out here towards Hay. It's Hayes that wants to hold this corner, and Fudge does get the visual on this and go for a flash as Hayes just tries to retreat. And a lockdown. This is used late. They waited for Kentucky to get closer to site to do so. This just burns so much clock, and Kentucky just have no way to counter this without playing direct, and the time is just so valuable for LA Tech's hold. Shots connect for the Blade Storm of all things out of Fussy. The Nanoswarms keep them away from Spike, and Magnetic feels like they have to stick this. One bullet will be all it takes. Halfway to the stick. Knock wants to spray, and Elijah gets through. You have to contest this cornball, and there's just no time to do so.
Win.
13 for LA Tech. The timeout didn't give them the immediate round win afterwards, but it allowed for them to digest maybe what Kentucky were bringing to the table, and it gets them the 13th eventually. And LA Tech, well, I still think fall off of the number 4 overall team in Tier 2, at least make up a whole heck of a lot of that prowess in our minds, and that final map, they win very cleanly.
While sure, it doesn't put them nearly as high on the rankings, what we could possibly see going forward, it does at least restore some relative dignity from what they lost during that last couple maps. I mean, seeing how things were going wasn't too hot for them. They've had plenty of chances, but even then, that map was the one that said definitively that, yes, we do belong to be in this upper echelon, because we've been missing that a little bit. I mean, sure, while you love the competitiveness of seeing 13-10s, 13-11s, even overtimes in these kind of higher areas where these guys are so darn close to each other, I don't know if it's enough to set enough of these teams apart to say, look, if you're dusting these guys in Tier 2, you're proving a point to us to say we don't belong here. There's bigger meals out there to fulfill our stomachs.
There's bigger morsels.
And it's just right now, you guys are settling what you got. I mean, obviously, no discredit to what they did. I mean, LA Tech pulling it out. Outstanding for them. 13-7. That's what you really got to pay attention to if you're them, for the sake of confidence, but for the sake of, the bigger picture, the longer goal at hand, you got to look at that 13-10, got to look at that 13-11 and see really what happened there during those first two.
Yeah, Split is a map I don't think LA Tech were really wanting to play into at all. The fact that Lotus was still that close and it was LA Tech's kind of pick scared me for quite a while.
Right.
I was concerned for the longest time. They had to make a 6-round comeback.
And being down, too.
Yeah, a 6-round comeback was necessitated from them. Map 3 saves a whole lot mentally and procures them at least a prettier picture. I still think they're a very solid top 8 team here for the SEL, but when you're talking about just how difficult Tier 1 is and the teams that are up there and how many of our Tier 2 teams feel like they should be in Tier 1, but it's just the limitation of only having 8 teams up in those first 2 pools, it's just going to be a hard battle to come back from. But you got weeks ahead of you. You got playoffs coming into the future. You've got so much time to build up a repertoire, build up a playbook, a strat book, depth with your team even, right? We talked about the legacy that it feels like LA Tech are, having so much history of the SEL and as a program. It's not the same players, but it almost feels like when you are a program and you have players prior, it's a B team where they get trained under that. It's players that kind of step between twos. They stay over for grad team and they start to help the team out and help the new players grow into their roles. These things stay. It's just how esports are at the collegiate level. And I'm seeing glimpses of that from LA Tech Blue, but it's not at the same level. And I think they have the ability to actually go above and beyond that. Time will tell, though.
Yeah, I think honestly, I mean, LA Tech, as I mentioned, always been a playoff team. Unfortunately, haven't made it to the lands they've been invited to. That's kind of the biggest holdback I've seen because, I mean, I would love to see what those guys could have done at LAN over and over again. But, I mean, still, this is a new era. I mean, obviously, even then as time goes on, you get more money, you get more funding, and you get to the point where you can possibly take those trips. Or even different students who have richer moms and dads who are willing to pay for those trips. But as it stands right now, I mean, being in tier 2, you got to work a little bit longer. Your road is going to be much further, but thankfully you can do most of that heavy lifting on the server so long as you climb up through that playoffs bracket. But I mean, looking at those top dogs, seeing those scores, seeing those results, seeing how cutthroat they are, there's going to be a pretty big jump you got to make. And even then, as I mentioned, looking at them and what they did with Georgia Tech, I'm not going to say it's a fluke. I mean, we got to see Georgia Tech still and kind of witness what they can do in the server, but seeing that they gobble everybody else up in these matchups is it may just been a sleepy week for them.
Yeah, Georgia Tech, I think I don't want to do the same pool back-to-back weeks, Dallas. I think we had a different game we were looking towards next week. We're trying to look ahead at least a little bit, but man, that would be a really great matchup to have on broadcast. But I have no doubts that Georgia Tech will likely make it through, right? They're going to get into the playoffs, so we can watch them then. And for a bit of a keen eye for the players maybe watching and tuning back into the stream after the broadcast is over, after their game is over, both for LA Tech and, well, the job's done for them, but they've already faced Georgia Tech. But for the Kentucky side, the captain, the IGL, the coach really, for Georgia Tech has been in the audience the entire time. They've been watching. They straight up said, we're trying to watch to see if we need to actually prepare for this or if there's anything we need to look out for. They are actively VOD reviewing. We highlighted that so much throughout all of the seasons of SCL and any league and program we're a part of, Dallas. If you're not VOD reviewing, you aren't going to be playing. You aren't going to be bringing the best of what you can. You have an opportunity to play esports at a level that many others don't get the chance to do. Don't squander the opportunity. Use it to its fullest. You will regret it in the next 10 years if you look back and say, I had time to practice. Why was I playing Among Us with my friends when I could have done a VOD review for an hour longer and then joined them and had a much better shot at winning the next game to get into a LAN environment and have that experience, which would have just enriched my experience at college on a whole nother level. But that's all we have here for this week of the SCL. Players got to keep their eyes out. We're returning next week with more Rocket League and Valorant action. So make sure you stay tuned for that. It's been Infernos to join alongside here, Mick. Thank you, Shaka, along in the booth, and Bulby once again, as always, for our observer. We've loved having you. We'll see you guys next week.